Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg, just a few minutes before 6 o'clock. Minus 16 right now. It is cloudy. And don't be fooled by that temperature of minus 16. We're actually going to take a bit of a dive this morning down to minus 21 before we start to rise later in the day. A mix of sun and clouds in Winnipeg today. Our morning show, CBC's Information Radio with Marcy Marcusa, is on the way. We will hear from a Partisan panel coming up just after the 7:30 news, after that big news yesterday of the resignation of Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Our panel is going to join us to hash out events of the last 24 hours through their Manitoba lens. And with that, we look at some headlines this morning. A political expert says Justin Trudeau could not possibly have won the next election and would be seen by the Americans as a lame duck prime minister. University of Manitoba professor emeritus Paul Thomas says the resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland sunk Trudeau. Thomas says there has been no progress in Parliament on any significant legislation for a long time. And he says the Liberals needed a break and don't have a lot of time in terms of coming to terms with incoming U.S. President Donald Trump and getting ready for the next federal election. As the federal Liberal Party heads towards that leadership race, Manitoba Pork says a top priority for the government should be the threat by U.S. President-elect Trump to impose that 25% tariff on Canadian imports. General Manager Cam Dahl says a strategic plan is needed for all agriculture and food industries, not just for pork. So we're going to hear more from him. We'll also hear from business coming up in the news. And our first local newscast is coming your way at 6:30. And as we look at the forecast now, we had a little bit of light snow earlier. It's going to be cloudy to start today, and then the sky begins to clear. And as that clearing happens, our temperature falls to minus 21 this morning before rising. Still a risk of frostbite out there. Overnight, a low of minus 21. The temperature climbs to minus 17 by tomorrow morning, and it's going to be a lot warmer tomorrow, a high of minus 9. Well, our morning show is on the way. Marcy Marcusa will join you following World Report coming up at 6.
On cue.
I'm Saroja Coelho sitting in for Tom Power. When violinist Lara St. John was just a teenager, she went through a traumatic experience at the hands of her 78-year-old instructor. Lara talks about how she hopes to make the world of classical music a safer place.
It's so much victim blaming. It's crazy.
Cue. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The next couple of months will plunge Canadians into some unfamiliar political territory, and there are a lot of questions about how government will function when the Liberals will choose a new leader and how soon Canadians will be going to the polls. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau with some of the answers, and Janice, Parliament is prorogued until March 24th. What happens if it needs to pass a bill before then?
Well, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge, Marcia, is that we haven't really had a functioning parliament all fall in the sense of the governing party being able to legislate its agenda without opposition obstruction. Prorogation now means that all of the government bills and Ways and Means motions to implement budget measures fall away. More than 24 that were stuck at different stages of review, including parliamentary approval for key changes to the taxation of capital gains, priority spending for the border, the controversial online harms legislation, a bill the NDP wanted to make it easier to vote in elections. All that falls away. As it stands, the Liberals would start fresh with a throne speech on March 25th, setting out a new agenda, perhaps to take to voters. And while the throne speech could trigger a confidence vote, it's more likely that the government could fall on a spending vote first, because that last week of March is the end of the government's fiscal year. And if they don't want to have to go to the Governor-General to get special warrants to keep the lights on this spring, the House of Commons is going to be asked to approve spending estimates almost immediately. Yes, the opposition is threatening non-confidence motions. Frankly, the House may not even get that far, setting us on a path to an election maybe in early May.
The Liberals need a new leader. How fast can they mobilize to get one?
The Liberal Party president said his board's going to meet this week to begin setting the rules and the timelines for a race, a process they had to get cracking on within 27 days of this announcement by Trudeau. But the threat of an election means they need to work much faster than the 3 or 4 month race that the constitution of the party might suggest, as Minister Mark Miller acknowledged last night.
It's unfathomable to me that we can't choose a leader of a Liberal Party in a 30 to 60-day period. Those rules that were not necessarily designed for Minority Parliament under this type of pressure can be adapted. And
while they're at it, would Liberals also address a key vulnerability of their leadership selection process that came under criticism at the foreign interference inquiry last fall? The party's openness to voters that aren't Canadian citizens or permanent residents. The party spokesperson told CBC News yesterday that Liberals don't intend to change that.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Government may be prorogued until March, but Canada still has important business to attend to in the next 2.5 months, especially south of the border. Canada's premiers want to make sure the response to Donald Trump's tariff threat is not neglected. They wrote to the Prime Minister yesterday saying Canada needs to demonstrate strength and unity at this time. The premiers have requested regular group meetings with the Prime Minister, beginning with an in-person meeting next week. With that looming tariff threat and Trump's inauguration around the corner, concerns are growing over the impact on Canada's economy. As Katie Simpson reports, Ottawa is showing signs it is ready to retaliate.
What are you looking forward to in 2025?
Well, just great, a great year. I think we're going to do fantastically well as a country.
As Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House with the mandate given to him by voters, fear is growing in Canada. His mind is made up about tariffs. According to a senior Canadian government source, officials around the Prime Minister are increasingly concerned Trump is ready to follow through on his threat. The president-elect vowed to impose 25% levies on all imports from Canada and Mexico on his first day in office, unless major improvements are made to border security, though recently he's added complaints about the trade deficit with Canada. The source says Trump's language on social media, repeatedly praising tariffs as a tool to generate wealth, is partially why the concern continues to grow. And so Canada is finalizing its retaliation strategy. Expect officials to threaten tariffs on a wide range of American goods, including Florida orange juice, in the days ahead. By choosing an export from Trump's adopted state, it's meant to send a message to those at the new center of American power. But how threats will be received in the U.S. from the Trudeau government as the Prime Minister plans to leave, it could undercut the Canadian message. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The last time Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted to buy Greenland. Danish authorities quickly threw cold water on that idea. Now Trump is back on social media saying, "Make Greenland great again." Today, his son Donald Trump Jr. is visiting Greenland. It is said to be a private one-day visit. Trump Jr. will reportedly shoot video content for his podcast, and he will not be meeting any government officials while he's there. At least 95 people are dead after an earthquake in Tibet. It happened in a mountainous region early this morning. Another 130 people were injured. And as aftershocks continue, officials are warning the number of people killed will rise. The CBC's South Asia correspondent, Salima Shivji, has the latest.
Rescue workers scramble to climb over large piles of rubble, searching through the broken bricks for any survivors. In this remote region near one of Tibet's holiest cities, Shigatse, the death toll keeps climbing after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit, Beijing said. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the quake at a magnitude of 7.1. Some 40 aftershocks also struck soon after, leaving debris from crumbled storefronts all over the roads in the hardest hit area. More than 1,000 homes have been damaged. The ground started to shake violently in the morning, with tremors felt as far away as the Indian state of Bihar. And in neighboring Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, some 400 kilometers from the epicenter, where residents rushed out of their homes for safety. I was sleeping when the earthquake hit. I thought my child was moving the bed, this woman says. I'm still shaking from fear and I'm in shock. China has raised its emergency response level to the highest possible, with tens of thousands of tents and blankets dispatched to help as many people as possible before the sun goes down. But the remote terrain, high altitude, and freezing temperatures are expected to slow down rescue efforts in an area prone to devastating earthquakes. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
South Korea's transport minister says he takes responsibility for the Jeju airplane crash last month, and he intends to step down. He says he will resign as soon as the current situation is dealt with. The accident killed 179 people on board the Boeing jet. The transport ministry is promising to overhaul the safety of airport landing systems. France is marking 10 years since the Charlie Hebdo terror attack.
C'est un coup de téléphone, le souvenir le plus fort. Membre de la rédaction de Charlie Hebdo m'appelle alors que je suis déjà.
Former French President François Hollande describes a phone call he received after the attack. 2 gunmen stormed the offices of the satirical newspaper on January 7th, 2015. 11 members of the editorial staff were killed. A police officer was also shot and killed outside the building in Paris. 2 brothers planned the attack after the paper published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The U.S. Capitol is preparing to receive the casket of Jimmy Carter. Services for the late former president will move from his home state of Georgia to Washington, D.C. today. He will lie in state ahead of Thursday's funeral. President Joe Biden has declared January 9th a national day of mourning. Steve Futterman has more from Atlanta.
Long-standing traditions will continue today as Jimmy Carter's body travels to Washington for the final time. The former president's flag-draped casket will leave the Carter Center here in Atlanta this morning. It will then be placed on board one of the presidential planes. For this trip, though, the plane will not be called Air Force One, but rather Special Air Mission 39, to commemorate Carter being the 39th president. Throughout the night, even in temperatures near freezing, a steady flow of people walked past the casket.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, this kind of experience.
This woman brought her 2 young children. She said it was emotional.
He was truly a man who lived a good life and put people first, and that's what matters.
After arriving in Washington, the casket will be placed on a horse-drawn caisson and travel up Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution Avenue to the U.S. Capitol. It will then be taken by members of the military up the Capitol steps into the rotunda. It will lie in state on the same catafalque that was originally used to hold the casket of Abraham Lincoln. Carter's state funeral will be held on Thursday. It will be attended by Joe Biden, along with former presidents and foreign dignitaries. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Atlanta.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown. It's cold, and it's going to get colder, actually. A bit of a dip before we warm up later today. Thanks for joining us on CBC. Good morning to the team, Kevin Nipatebo, to May McKillop, to Abby Adeyemi, and to Corey Funk, who's on location with us. Corey's going to be, we're hoping, if we can connect with him successfully. We're still working on that. But going to be getting some opinions about what people are thinking out there in Manitoba on this historic day in our Canadian history and in Canadian politics. So after nearly a decade and 3 governments formed, 1 majority, 2 minorities, Justin Trudeau has resigned as Liberal leader, and effectively he says he'll resign as Prime Minister once his successor is named. So we have a lot of analysis of that. What does it mean for you? We'll get some of your comments on air, and in the second hour of the show we have a partisan panel, so lots coming up from a Manitoba point of view. I also want to mention other things. So Merry Christmas if you celebrate on the Orthodox calendar. Today's January 7th. For the first time, of course, many Ukrainian Winnipeggers will not celebrate the holiday today. One says it's been a bit of a blue Christmas as a result for him and his family. We're going to talk to him in the first hour of the program as well. Right now, before we get into weather and traffic, let's turn our attention to Heather Wells, who's here with our morning headlines.
Good morning. Well, a political expert says Justin Trudeau's resignation and the pause on Parliament will help the Liberals. University of Manitoba professor emeritus Paul Thomas says Trudeau would have become a lame duck prime minister, and he says the Liberals don't have a lot of time in terms of coming to terms with incoming U.S. President Donald Trump and getting ready for the next federal election. Manitoba's premier says Justin Trudeau's resignation is not slowing down his efforts to forge important trade relationships with Americans. Wab Kinew is in North Dakota today, where he will talk trade with that state's new governor. We'll hear more from Wab Kinew coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Now, let's get into this forecast. Abby Adeyemi is here. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Maris. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I have to say, I was just out there, and it's the kind of cold that stays in the ends of your digits, the ends of the fingers and toes.
It is real. It is chilly this morning, and I'm just concerned about folks in Churchill because we have an extreme cold warning for folks there. It's going to get very cold with wind chills feeling like minus 50 tonight for folks in Churchill, and the temperatures will be dropping to around minus 30 later. Though if you combine that with a light breeze, it's going to feel extremely cold along the Hudson Bay coast. So these are just cold conditions. According to the forecast here, it's going to be easing by Tuesday morning, and it says everyone is at risk because of frostbite and exposed skin, which can happen in minutes. We come down to Winnipeg, chilly outside, minus 17. We're seeing light snowflakes coming down in the city. We should expect this a day cloudy, a bit of light snow this morning, giving way to a mix of sun and clouds later in the day. And then our temperature for the city is going to be deep into around minus 21 this morning before climbing up a little. Though the wind chill this morning is going to make it feel like minus 30 as you start your day. So I'll just advise you to bundle up. And it's similar conditions for most regions around us, from western Manitoba to the south central regions. We're looking at temperatures around minus 36. That's the wind chill values for those areas. But Churchill is the concern this morning. Right now, Winnipeg, it is chilly. Minus 17 we are at.
Now, we will check traffic in a moment, but I just want to first sort of tap into this. So if you're watching on YouTube, I think we're up on YouTube, right? So the big headline today, there's your Winnipeg Free Press, Trudeau resigns. That's a headline all around the world, of course. I was asking yesterday on Facebook, what do you want in the next Prime Minister? Because obviously we're going to have another person at the helm, no matter who wins the election that's going to happen this year. Chris Brandon wrote in, first and foremost, any new government that takes power here needs to hold the Trump administration accountable and protect Canada's interests. That has to be priority number one. Hopefully with the distraction of someone that has become the subject of such vitriol for so many taken out of the equation, the country can move ahead and actually once again start doing things for the good of its people. Other people weighing in already from Manitoba, Jay Germain saying, time to let Chrystia Freeland shine. She has what it takes. And Amanda LaRouche saying she wants political smarts, effective communication skills, and understanding that political office is public service. Benjamin Maia writing in, Pierre, and Teresa Simos writing in, Mark Carney, and then Constance Craven writing in, Wab, our premier for PM. So people weighing in with their thoughts, with names. We'd love your Manitoba perspective on today's top story. Now, I can tell you about traffic a little bit. Because it's so cold, the streets are actually in pretty good condition in the city of Winnipeg. You've got those icy patches, but mostly you've got dry pavement out there as we do have cold conditions. Check 511 though before you head out on the highways, and note the exhaust fog. It's that kind of cold in parts of Manitoba today for sure. Call us if you need us, 788-3093. Well, let's start looking at a story that's generational. We all know that Gen Z was raised with the glow of a computer screen in their eyes, and then there's Generation Alpha, spent their childhood wearing face masks during the pandemic. So now we're in 2025. There's a new generation in town. Enter Generation Beta. For over 25 years, Sean Lyons has been studying generational differences. He's the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics at the University of Guelph. He spoke with CBC's Chloe Friesen about all of these generational differences on Up to Speed.
Hi there.
So what do we know about this newest generation, Generation Beta? I know they're only a few days old, but what do we got?
We know that they are starting to be born, and that's about all.
Okay.
It's tempting, I think, for us to look for that next generation and try to give them a name and ascribe some values and speculate on who they're going to be and what they're going to do for the world. But typically, what we do when we study generations is wait until they're nearing adulthood to really determine, first of all, if they are a unique generation, because it's not automatic that a generation comes along at regular intervals like a bus stop. And then what's going to be the difference between that generation and previous generations? So the verdict is still really out about what this group is going to be, if they're going to be anything unique, because we still don't even really know that much about Generation Alpha, so as they're being referred to.
So then how are they given a name already then? Why are they called the Beta generation?
Well, Generation X got its name from the Douglas Copeland novel Generation X, which came out in the 90s, which was talking about this post-boomer generation and, the struggles that they had getting established in adulthood. And people kind of got lazy from there on. Generation Y was the next group because Y comes after X.
Okay.
But then they quickly got the name Millennials because, they sort of came to adulthood at the change of the millennium. But then we went back to Z, and, we ran out of letters. Copeland published a book about 10 years ago called Generation Alpha, but it wasn't about this generation. But I think we just kind of figured, after Z, we have to come up with something, and they went to the Greek alphabet.
Okay, so we've got Generation Beta will be children born between 2025 and 2039. So I'm curious, so you say it's not like a bus stop, but how does it work? Is it just like a collective societal agreement that when a generation starts and ends?
Well, when we talk about generations, we're talking about social change, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. So if you ask me, the children who were born this week, since January 1st, are they in any way different than the children who were born at the end of December? No. It's sort of an ebb and flow of social change that comes about. And often when we look at different issues or different markers of what might create a generation, we might pick different dates. So even scholars who study this, like I do, don't necessarily agree on a definite date. We sort of have ranges. And what we have seen in recent generations is pretty reliably, about every 15 years, we're starting to see some significant changes in how young people interact with the world. So I think what we're doing is speculating that the generation that came after Z, the Generation Alphas, they're hitting about 15 at their front end. So we're probably going to see something new taking shape, but they're babies. So they're doing baby things right now.
Exactly.
The verdict is still very much out about what they're going to be like.
Right.
But the drivers of generational change, which is parenting styles and technology and social change broadly, sort of progress towards social change, all of those things are happening at the same accelerated pace that we saw with the previous couple generations, and maybe even more so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there is something that we're going to say about this generation, it's going to be that they are fully integrated with AI, that they will have AI as part of their lives. By the time they get to kindergarten, I think we'll have a lot more comfort with what AI does as part of the elementary school curriculum. High school students will have a better sense of how to use it. We're all very much grappling with it right now, but you can see people really starting to understand it. The generation before them will be the ones who really push that change, because that will be just natural to them. What you do in a world where AI has just always been in existence that's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. Also, this generation will not have lived through the COVID-19 pandemic. That's something that we look at as very, formative for Gen Alpha kids or COVID babies. We talk about that a lot. How might that influence them?
Yeah, I think that's one of those markers that's really going to leave a mark for different generations who lived through it at different times in their lives. It'll have its impact on different ways. For Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who were, had that as part of their experience, either in elementary school or high school or university, it really will have had impact on the way that they learned and socialized and their employment opportunities. And those things can have knock-on effects that last a long time. For this group, they won't have experienced any of this, and they'll only have ever heard about the pandemic historically from their parents, older siblings, grandparents. So I don't really think that it's going to have a huge impact on them in the way that it does on us.
Right.
I grew up in the 1980s, and I remember hearing about Vietnam, which ended before I was born, and it was just this echo that was around. It had its impact, but I had no personal experience with it. I imagine that's how they're going to feel about the pandemic.
It's probably going to be more of an impact for people like me. I'm Gen Z. I'll finally be able to say, back in my day.
Yes, I lived through a pandemic. I always like to say to people who are getting established right now in their careers, it's tough, but at least you get bragging rights. Like you can say, I did all the things that you did, but during a global pandemic.
I'll take it. Sean, what do you think parents of this new generation need to know? Or is it just babies doing baby things, as you said?
Well, parenting is one of those really interesting things that has its impacts on generations because we see generations unfold and then those different generations parent in different ways, and then they create a new generation based on that parenting. It's very cyclical. So it's one of the more interesting aspects of how generations work. So this is the first time we're going to get to see Gen Z babies. Like they're going to be parented by Gen Z. So we all sort of, I think, react to the parenting style that we encountered when we were children from our parents. Gen Z largely had sort of older Xer, late boomer parents. Gen Z, I think, are by all accounts a pretty anxious generation. It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to parenthood and the sort of approach they take to parenting. So my advice is, really take a look. There's a lot of evidence out there about how past generations have parented their children and what the impacts sort of are said to be. It's really important to take a look at that and say, we don't want to overparent. We don't want to underparent. We don't want to be overprotective. We don't want to be underprotective, but try to find that balance because that's really important in the formative years of children.
Well, Sean, thank you for joining us. And I guess we'll connect with you in 15, 20 years for our definitive answer on Gen Beta.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Generation Delta, and I'll be ready for that conversation as well.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
That is Chloe Friesen, guest hosting Up to Speed, in conversation with Sean Lyons, the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at Gordon Laing School of Business and Economics at the University of Guelph. That's a long time to wait for a follow, 20 years. It is 6:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Marcy Marcus on CBC. Well, next on the program, somber is not typically a word that would come to mind when you're thinking about the holiday season, but that's exactly how Winnipegger Nick Kowalchuk describes his Christmas this year. Nick's Ukrainian Orthodox, so for most of his life, he celebrated Christmas today, January 7th. But last year, Ukraine announced that Christmas was being moved to celebrate on the 25th of December to create distance from Russians, who continue to mark the holiday on the old calendar. The changes were made both in Ukraine, but also here by the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And this is the first real year where they've settled in. So Nick is with us this morning. Good morning. I think we've just lost Nick. He was there via Zoom. And
hello. Good morning.
Good morning. I think you were muted there. Nice to have you with us. How are you feeling today? I just set up the whole, fact that this is a very unusual year for you.
Yeah, no, it is unique, and it's feeling like a little bit of a loss, right? And we're we're just going through and trying to figure things out as it's evolving into getting into the Western dates of Christmas.
I know that last year you were sort of in that limbo period, as were a lot of Manitoba Ukrainian families who celebrated on the 7th for the most of their lives. And you did, as I recall, still celebrate on the 7th, have your dinner. What are you doing today? How have you, what are your plans for today?
Just going to work. It's really flipped it up. There are no plans in terms of our, we just finished celebrating Epiphany yesterday, and we had the blessing of the water on the 5th. So now it's the Christmas holiday is winding down already. So it's just a new perspective that we're getting accustomed to. So nothing special today.
War has obviously brought to mind, as it does in any conflict in the world, but as it pertains to Ukraine, the need and the pull to sort of maintain culture, to maintain tradition, to maintain identity for Ukrainians. Did you bring some of that into the December 25th celebrations in your home?
Yes, yeah, we did. Typically on the 24th, we would have a Lenten meal, and it wasn't fully Lenten for everybody, but for some of us, while we were participating, we did have a Lenten meal, and then after the Lenten meal, then we went and had a Christmas service, a liturgy at 10:30 at night.
How different did it feel?
It was different, and it was awkward because again on the 24th we normally would kind of say, well, you see somebody and you wish them Merry Christmas, but and when you're saying Christ is born, and it's just like It felt different, but it's going to take generations to change. It's going to take generations to evolve, and then so we get into this new feeling of having Christmas around the holidays, where there's days off or whatever the case is, and then and maybe it'll become normal again. But it's just it's compacting it a bit into the holiday period, and so it's just.
It's a shift.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Yeah.
It's a shift. It would be a big shift, though, if you've done that for your whole life. So
well, and also, I mean, we are having Malanka celebrations, which is the New Year's Eve celebrations this weekend, and there's some even next weekend. So it's just kind of discombobulated in that odd way, because Malanka is it's a New Year's Eve dance celebration, and so when we've moved some of the festivities to the 24th and 25th, and then some of them we haven't, and again we've had the Epiphany and the blessing of the water on the 5th of January and the 6th. Then to have New Year's after that, it's not in order, but again, we'll find a new norm, but we'll see how that all plays out.
Well, I would say Christos Rozdaitsia today, but I guess I won't say that today, but I will say Happy New Year to you, and enjoy Malanka, and of course all of these special things that come with, you've been mentioning some of the religious holidays that have just passed. So nice to have you on with us this morning, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you.
That is Nick Kowalczyk, a Ukrainian Manitoban, talking about the transition that a lot of families will be going through this year, not celebrating today on the 7th, Ukrainians, that is, for Orthodox Christmas. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC Business News is still ahead right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is minus 17, and we're not warming up, at least not right away. We're going to get a little cooler, dropping to minus 21 this morning before the temperature rises, becoming a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. The race is on to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader and Canada's next Prime Minister. So far, no one has officially declared they're running. David Hurley is a veteran Liberal Party campaign organizer.
The odds of the Liberal Party winning this election are pretty remote, but it is quite possible in my mind for the Liberal Party to, at the end of the election, be at 30-some points with 100 and some seats, because right now we're in an artificial world. 45% of Canadians are not Conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre is currently getting the votes of people who disagree with him. And he's getting them because people hate Justin Trudeau.
Last night, Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, released a statement saying he will consider his decision whether to run with his family over the coming days. A political expert says Justin Trudeau could not possibly have won the next election and would be seen by the Americans as a lame duck prime minister. University of Manitoba professor emeritus Paul Thomas says the resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland sunk Trudeau. Thomas says there has been no progress on any significant legislation for a long time. And he says the Liberals need a break.
They don't have a lot of time, both in terms of upcoming parliamentary session and coming to terms with Trump and getting ready for the next election, where it's about the size of their defeat rather than whether they'll lose power or not.
As the federal Liberal Party heads towards a leadership race, Manitoba Pork says a top priority for the government should be the threat by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. General Manager Cam Dahl says a strategic plan is needed for all agriculture and food industries, not just pork.
We still have a government, we still have a cabinet, we still have ministers, and you know, this needs to be at the very top of their list of the work that they're carrying out today. So I would hope that our federal Minister of Agriculture is going to, take on this task and take on the job of ensuring that we have a plan in place.
Dahl says the pork industry exports about 40% of what it produces to the United States. Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe says political leaders in U.S. border states do not support new tariffs being threatened by Donald Trump. Canoe is in North Dakota today, meeting with that state's newly elected governor. Canoe says he also spoke with the governor of Wisconsin and the U.S. ambassador to Canada.
We as a trading province, we as an agricultural province, we as a manufacturing province have really great relationships with North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that it's important for us to nourish these relationships to build a strong partnership across the Canadian and U.S. border.
Canoe also says Prime Minister Trudeau's resignation yesterday is not interfering in trade talks with the U.S. In other news, a Point Douglas building that housed a Greek Orthodox church for decades went up in flames last night for the fourth time since October 2021. It happened the night before Orthodox Christmas. Firefighters spent all night battling flames and smoke at the building on Euclid that used to be the home of Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church. Stephanie Sarlakis is the church secretary. She says they moved out of the building after the third fire in June and have been holding services in people's homes.
It is bittersweet because, we were located in that building for more than 40 years, and it's just kind of like closing a chapter and kind of figuring out what our next steps are.
Sarlakis says a sale was pending for the building on Euclid, but she knows last night's fire will affect those plans. At least one parent says the province's new teacher registry doesn't go far enough to keep students safe. The public registry shows disciplinary records of Manitoba teachers. Anyone can look up certification status of a teacher and find out if they've ever been suspended or if they can no longer teach in the province. Krista Hurd took her two children out of a Winnipeg private school over concerns about a teacher's inappropriate behavior. She says the new registry does not say why a teacher has been disciplined.
This will cause a lot of confusion and maybe give certain parents carte blanche to just sort of call in and say that, hey, my child's teacher is unsuitable, and potentially ruin some livelihoods and reputations of some very good and caring teachers.
As of Monday, the registry shows there have been 2 teacher suspensions since the beginning of the year. We're following a deadly earthquake in Tibet this morning. This security camera recorded the moment it hit. Chinese state media says at least 95 people have been killed in Tibet near the border with Nepal. U.S. officials say the quake was magnitude 7.1 and there are reports of aftershocks. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. And you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of folks asking questions, and they were the same questions we were all asking yesterday when Justin Trudeau got in front of that microphone and made it official. And the number one thing I think that people were asking when even just in my life and here in the newsroom even immediately is, what does this mean for an election? So could there be one between now and May 24th? And no, there can't, because Parliament's not there, right? But as soon as
March
24th, pardon me, yeah. But March 24th, after that, then it's widely expected that non-confidence vote will happen. And it looks like we'll be going to the polls then.
Right. Yeah, because both the Conservatives and the New Democrats, as well as the Bloc, are all saying they are going to vote non-confidence on a speech from the throne or any kind of spending bill.
Yeah, so that's your answer to that, because I think that's the number one thing, right? The average person wonders is like, when are we going to be voting? So certainly it's this year. Will it be this spring or will it be in the fall? I guess that will be determined by whatever happens next. What a day in politics it was.
Historic for sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Heather Wells in our news center this morning. Now, some of the other questions that have come up, we're going to answer for you on Ottawa Report. So we have Ryan Tumulty, who's going to be joining us just before 7 o'clock this morning. It's 23 minutes to right now. It's time to get into our regional forecast from CBC Manitoba on Information Radio. And that means Abby Adiemi is going to take over the mic.
Yep, we're looking at that dangerous cold chills in Churchill that's going to be hitting tonight. We're going to see wind chill values in the minus 50s, and then it's going to drop to low minus 30s later, but that would be staying till tomorrow. For Winnipeg, today we're currently at minus 17, seeing lights outside. Some cloudy skies will stay with us. Then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures will drop into around minus 21, but the wind chill this morning feels like minus 30. In the western part of the province, similar conditions, minus 17 in Brandon with light snow. Some cloudy conditions you'd wake up to, then a mix of sun and clouds later. It will feel cold with the wind chills making it feel like minus 27 for folks in Brandon. If we look at conditions in the Pembina Valley region, it's mostly similar to Winnipeg, Morden at minus 17 right now. Same thing for Gimli at minus 17. Cloudy skies, light snow in the forecast, mix of sun and clouds later, wind chill close to minus 30. Dauphin is at minus 26. It's going to be mainly sunny today, though the wind chill feel like minus 36 this morning, and then temperatures will be dropping further as you get into the evening. The Pamphlet Flon already around minus 22 with light snow, mostly cloudy. There's a slight chance of flurries later in the day that's going to be hanging around. Wind chills will make it feel like minus 34 this morning. And for Thompson, we're seeing temperatures around minus 28, minus 29 at this time. The wind chill is going to be in the range of minus 36, 37. And for Churchill, actual temperatures in Churchill at this time, minus 38 with that extreme cold warning in effect. We will see a mix of sun and clouds, but that will not be warming things up, because as we get closer to the evening period, the wind chill is going to be feeling near minus 50, making it dangerous for folks in Churchill. So you want to take care. Marcia, I'll tell you, the entire province this morning will be facing that cold condition. We're still in that vortex.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Went to wash my car the other day, and on the entrance to the car wash, I couldn't even see to get the car into the tracks before you slip it into neutral. There was so much exhaust fog from the cold. So the drive, speaking of which, the drive, walk, or roll, your commute this morning should be pretty good. We're not hearing of any major problems. I just checked the Traffic Management Center, and all seems okay. But please check 511 before you hit the highways, just in case, and watch for those regular icy patches as come up in the wintertime on you. 788-3093 is where you can reach us. I guess the biggest thing with the commute is hoping that you plugged in your car last night if it sat outside. Well, it is 20 to 7 right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. We have business news in a moment. But first, let's touch base with Corey Funk. Corey is out on location this morning. He's out at the Tim Hortons. That's at 9 Killarney, pretty much Killarney and Pembina. And he is there because he's going to be talking to people through the morning about, I wonder what you could be asking about, Corey.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, well, actually, I've actually already talked to one person. His name's Michael. And he was saying, it's of course I was asking about Trudeau's resignation. And he said to him, he says, yeah, it's about time, but he wants to see a competitive race that actually leads to someone who can compete in the next election. Because he says at the end of the day, he didn't want to say who he votes, but he just wants to see a competitive election ahead with contenders who all aren't just the liberals. He doesn't want them to put up a lame duck or something like that. And he says no matter what, though, he says he's a calm, cool Canadian, and he says he's not really that worried at the day of how things are going to turn out, and he doesn't think there's a big panic to be had with the Prime Minister resigning.
So the calm, cool Canadian that he was referring to wasn't Trudeau, it was himself.
Yes, that's right. That's himself. He was saying the other day, I'm a calm, cool Canadian, and I'm not really worried about. I'm sure Trudeau has some other feelings right now.
So you are, so to speak, open for talk and open for coffee and people dropping by and dropping in with their opinions as they're picking up coffee, right?
For sure. Come on by to 9 Killarney here at Tim Hortons, and I'll be the guy with headphones and a microphone and walk it around. So if you want to chat, come on down.
Okay, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Corey's going to spend the morning there. If that's on your route, please make sure you go there today and weigh in. And remember, you can weigh in on Mike, or as Corey, talks to people sometimes as you're in and out. We won't mess with your morning schedule. We'll get your opinion on air as we all navigate this new situation this morning. So Corey's live out there. Big thanks, by the way, to Nasli Sharma, who has facilitated us being there this morning. Well, it's time to turn our attention to Christely Ramlakan, who joins us now via Zoom with our business news today. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's get the business perspective to all of this. What are businesses saying, and what's the reaction been?
Well, business experts say this has caused more uncertainty amid the need for a unified front to face President-elect Donald Trump's threat of tariffs. So we've been speaking a lot about this last couple of weeks. Trump has threatened to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. And economists say uncertainty could temporarily deter investment flow into Canada, delaying the business recovery that interest rate cuts and easing inflation were expected to spur. Now, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce welcomed Trudeau's announcement, saying it marks a turning point as the country faces unprecedented domestic and international issues. And the Business Council of Canada says while Trudeau's legacy does include positives, it says it's unfortunate that so often the federal government was at odds with the private sector. And it says there was a lost opportunity to create better conditions for long-term economic growth. So for more on this, here's Barry Schwartz, who is with Baskin Wealth Management.
I guess what we're left with here in the moment is a mess. And because we have, a very pushy person coming in as president, and we have, Trudeau who's, half out the door and no one really to negotiate. And we need some tough negotiations at this time.
Now, Canada's main stock index closed slightly lower yesterday after the announcement, but Canadian oil and gas stocks climbed. So energy and tech were strong yesterday. And, the market famously hates uncertainty. So after months of speculation around Trudeau's next move, market watchers say there was likely a little relief that we found out what he was going to do next.
We'll have more analysis, of course, throughout the morning here. You right now have a story about a court order now that's ordering WestJet to hand over some files. What are the details here?
Yes, so the BC Supreme Court has ordered the airline to hand over all its files on harassment of flight attendants in a class action lawsuit alleging widespread misconduct by pilots. So the ruling says WestJet has been slow and possibly or potentially adversarial regarding these documents, and it's unclear why complaint files haven't been produced in a timely manner. So the underlying claim in this long-running lawsuit, which was filed back in 2016, alleges that WestJet breached flight attendants' contracts by breaking a promise to provide a harassment-free workplace. And the ruling says the airline tried to limit document production of complaints against male pilots by female flight attendants. But the judge in this case has ordered the airline to produce all harassment complaints, regardless of whom they were against. Now, WestJet says it has no comment on the case as it's still before the court, and the ruling says WestJet has handed over 24 harassment complaints, but the company's own internal statistics indicate there were significantly more during that period that's covered by the suit, which is 2014 to 2021.
And finally, Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, has a new board member. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so, usually maybe we wouldn't think that's that exciting, but it really does show us some insight into, how companies and President-elect Donald Trump are interacting. So Dana White, the CEO of the Ultimate Fighting Championship and a longtime friend of Donald Trump, is joining the board just 2 weeks before the new Trump administration begins. So White appeared with Trump on stage on election night after his win, and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg had a particularly tense relationship with Trump during his first term in office. But in a Facebook post, Zuckerberg says White has built the UFC into one of the most valuable, fastest growing, and most popular sports and enterprises in the world, and that he admires him as an entrepreneur. Now, Zuckerberg has been practicing mixed martial arts in recent years and has attended several UFC events, so maybe they overlap that way. But also, last month, Meta confirmed that the company had donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund, and Zuckerberg was one of the several tech executives who visited Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida following the election.
What are the numbers telling us today, Christely?
In Europe, markets are mixed. Germany is up, the UK is down, France is up. In Asia, markets are on the rise following an overnight rally in tech shares on Wall Street. So Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is up 55 cents to $74.11 US per barrel. Gold is up $12.70 to $2,648.80 US per ounce. And the dollar is up just over 1/10 cent to 69.9 cents US.
All right. Thanks a lot, Crystal Lee. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Lee Ramlakan with our business news from CBC.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Now, if I can do it, you can do it, people. So consider joining. The event is lovely. It's fun and it's easygoing, and it is outside, which is important for all of us, I think, to get outside. Well, I'm just speaking for myself. I should only speak for myself. It's important for me to get outside in the wintertime and remind myself that it's good for my soul. So I'm going to be doing that. Last year, you might recall that this was delayed by actually quite a margin because it was so warm that the ice was melting, so they couldn't hold the event as scheduled, and they had to wait until it got cold again. So usually we're not hoping for the frigid stuff, but for that event in February, we will be. This morning, we've got it minus 17 in the city of Winnipeg, and we're going to fall to a high of or I guess we're going to fall to a daytime high, which is lower than we are now, but we'll be at minus 21 for most of the morning. And there is that extreme cold warning for Churchill and York, and that means that temperatures with wind chill could feel like minus 50. So that's extreme wind chills this morning in the far north. Well, let's go and return to the top story in the country. It's been almost 24 hours, and reaction to the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau continues. Yesterday, the Prime Minister making his announcement, he's stepping down due to growing pressure within his caucus. This is some of what he said during his press conference.
This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
Trudeau also asked the Governor-General to prorogue Parliament, and she has until March 24th. Ryan Tumulty is here, political reporter with the Toronto Star. He joins us often on Tuesdays for Ottawa Report. Good morning.
Good morning.
Did you sleep?
I did some. I mean, I have a 6-month-old, so I never sleep that much. But yeah.
Fair enough. Big day yesterday. Wow. So it was an emotional day for the Prime Minister. What stood out for you from the press conference itself, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things were interesting. The location was interesting, of course. Rideau Cottage. That's where Canadians got to know Prime Minister. He talked to the country from those steps for a couple of months during the early days of the pandemic. So that was interesting. I thought it was interesting the way he framed this, that he was eager for this fight, that he was fully prepared to take on Pierre Poilievre, but he knows he can't fight his caucus and Pierre Poilievre at the same time. But not really acknowledging that, the reason he's getting pushback from his caucus is because he has become so unpopular. Not really acknowledging that the winds have changed against him. So I found all of that interesting. I thought it was interesting that the way he is framing this is, him leaving under a caucus revolt, not him leaving because he is incredibly unpopular.
Parliament's now prorogued until March 24th. How will a new Liberal leader be actually chosen? Because from what I can see, and I've been trying to see if they've nailed this down, but I don't see a timeline, right?
No, I mean, there is a process in the Liberal Party constitution, but that is not fit for this purpose. That is a process that envisions maybe a 6-month or a year-long leadership race even. And the Liberals obviously do not have that kind of time. So this is going to be a real challenge, I think, for the party. They're going to have to come up with a quick process. I think probably they have, from today, they have 77 days before Parliament returns. I think they're going to want to have this wrapped up in 60 days, give the new leader at least a little bit of time to get organized before an election. So I suspect in the next couple of days, we'll see what the process is. I think the party board is debating that now and trying to come up with an idea. But I would expect a quick process.
Now, a quick process. So we're expecting they'll have a Liberal leader before, obviously March 24th, which is important because if there's a non-confidence vote, we're going to the polls then. That person becomes the Liberal leader and they also become Prime Minister, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. How are the other parties reacting to all of this? Trudeau's resignation and, of course, the Governor-General proroguing Parliament.
Yeah, I was struck by the resignation announcement yesterday and the way the opposition reacted. Usually in a moment like this, and I think it sort of speaks to our politics, you at least get a, thank you for your service, disagreed on everything, but we have to thank him for what he's done for the country sort of thing. You heard none of that from the Conservative leader or the NDP leader yesterday. It was just immediately moving on to an attack against the Liberal Party more broadly, arguing that anyone who leads this party after Justin Trudeau will be just as bad. It was sort of immediately into campaign mode. They seem to be kind of unfazed by the prorogation. And I think what we were seeing there is sort of a recognition that they now know the election is on. We know that when the prorogation is ending, all of these opposition parties are going to vote to bring down the government. They've been very clear on that. They're going to have opportunities in that first week. I think the opposition parties are recognizing that the campaign, whoever they're going to have as an opponent, but the campaign is underway.
How quickly does it happen? Like if that happens within days and then off we go, how quickly could we be at the polls?
I think probably, the dates that are being bandied around are May 5th or May 12th.
Okay.
There are, provisions in the Elections Act for how long a campaign has to be, and that's probably what you're looking at. I think a lot depends, sort of a little bit on those first few days back. How quickly does the government just sort of introduce a throne speech and then accept that it has been defeated right away?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they play it out a little bit? Do they maybe even skip a throne speech altogether? Does the new leader go to the go to the Governor General before the Parliament is even scheduled to come back. So, these are the sorts of questions, I think, that we don't know yet, but I would suspect early May, Canadians will be casting their ballots.
Just as a last question, the Liberal caucus is meeting tomorrow. What's that going to be like?
I think that caucus is going to want to weigh in on next steps. So there's a lot of open questions. Obviously, what does the Liberal leadership look like? They don't decide that, but I'm sure they're going to want to offer their views up. How does the government work in the meantime? Who's going to be handling the big files, and how do they keep, the Liberal leadership, where we expect many cabinet ministers will be involved, how do they keep that leadership separate from, the broader mechanics of government? Do cabinet ministers have to step down from their jobs if they want to run for leader?
And then who's going to be left? Questions. Because there's like a panel of, it looks like there's a whole bunch of people's names up there on the board this morning. I was watching the coverage. Yeah. So
it's a big challenge.
Hey, I said last question, Ryan, but I want to slide one more in. There might be a lot of Canadians that are looking south and thinking, oh, this feels exactly like what happened down south. Or there's parallels here, right? Biden leaving, election coming, him saying he was the only one that could do it, Kamala saying I can do it, she loses. How many of those parallels could transfer to what's happening in our country?
Yeah, one, I don't think we're going to see what we saw in the States, which was that everyone rallying behind Kamala Harris. I don't think that's what's going to happen in this leadership race. I think it's going to be a hotly contested race. I don't think you're going to see sort of one clear victor emerge. After that, I don't know. I think the Liberal Party is still pretty unpopular. There's no real indication in public opinion pollings that changing the leader will fix everything and let them be government again. But you really never know. And I think, the election just got a lot more interesting. The person that the Conservatives and the NDP have been focusing on will not be the leader. So it will be a different campaign than I think what many people hope or expected.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
No problem. Take care.
That's Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star. Let's get headlines now from Heather Wells.
Well, with the federal Liberal Party heading towards a leadership race, industry leaders in Manitoba want the country's next leader to hear their concerns. They worry U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's threat of 25% tariffs on Canadian imports will hurt business in this province. We're going to hear from the Bioscience Association of Manitoba coming up. And the former home of a Winnipeg church went up in flames yesterday evening for the fourth time since October 2021, and it happened on the night before Orthodox Christmas. The building on Euclid used to house the Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church congregation. The church's secretary says it is all bad timing. Your next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is coming up to 7 o'clock, and World Report, the latest in national and international news, is still ahead. Dan on a bike called this morning to say this Tuesday morning, smooth cruising, if that's how you're commuting. Otherwise, call us on the commuter line, 788-3093. Minus 17 in Winnipeg. Our temperature will fall to minus 21, and there's an extreme cold warning for up in Churchill today. In the next hour of the show, one is chair of Manitoba's PC leadership race. One once challenged the leadership of a sitting NDP Manitoba premier. And one is a steadfast capital L Liberal, as she puts it. They are our partisan panel. They're going to talk about what Manitoba needs next in another prime minister, because we're going to have a new person no matter what. And also how Manitoba fared under Justin Trudeau. So we'll have a partisan panel to talk all about this. Stay with us in the next hour of the program. We'll also go back to Corey Funk, who's live at Tim's at Killarney and Pembina.
On the Current.
I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future.
The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation. What's next for the party and for the country as an election looms? We will hear from various perspectives, including from one of Trudeau's former closest advisors. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The next couple of months will plunge Canadians into some unfamiliar political territory, and there are a lot of questions about how government will function, when the Liberals will choose a new leader, and how soon Canadians will be going to the polls. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau with some of the answers. And Janice, Parliament is prorogued until March 24th. What happens if it needs to pass a bill before then?
Well, I think the first thing we have to acknowledge, Marcia, is that we haven't really had a functioning parliament all fall in the sense of the governing party being able to legislate its agenda without opposition obstruction. Prorogation now means that all of the government bills and Ways and Means motions to implement budget measures fall away. More than 24 that were stuck at different stages of review, including parliamentary approval for key changes to the taxation of capital gains, priority spending for the border, the controversial online harms legislation, a bill the NDP wanted to make it easier to vote in elections. All that falls away. As it stands, the Liberals would start fresh with a throne speech on March 25th, setting out a new agenda, perhaps to take to voters. And while the throne speech could trigger a confidence vote, it's more likely that the government could fall on a spending vote first, because that last week of March is the end of the government's fiscal year. And if they don't want to have to go to the Governor-General to get special warrants to keep the lights on this spring, the House of Commons is going to be asked to approve spending estimates almost immediately. Yes, the opposition is threatening non-confidence motions. Frankly, the House may not even get that far, setting us on a path to an election maybe in early May.
The Liberals need a new leader. How fast can they mobilize to get one?
The Liberal Party president said his board's going to meet this week to begin setting the rules and the timelines for a race, a process they had to get cracking on within 27 days of this announcement by Trudeau. But the threat of an election means they need to work much faster than the 3 or 4 month race that the constitution of the party might suggest, as Minister Mark Miller acknowledged last night.
It's unfathomable to me that we can't choose a leader of a Liberal Party in a 30 to 60-day period. Those rules that were not necessarily designed for Manitoba Parliament under this type of pressure can be adapted.
And while they're at it, would Liberals also address a key vulnerability of their leadership selection process that came under criticism at the foreign interference inquiry last fall? The party's openness to voters that aren't Canadian citizens or permanent residents. The party spokesperson told CBC News yesterday that Liberals don't intend to change that.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. In Yukon, Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, leaders are reflecting on the work Justin Trudeau did in the North, including apologizing for historical wrongdoings to Inuit, touring wildfire-ravaged communities, and celebrating a 50-year-old land claim in Yukon. But as Juanita Taylor tells us, they are also reflecting on the work Trudeau is leaving unfinished.
He's a fighter. He doesn't like to let go.
Yukon MP Brendan Hanley says he's relieved Justin Trudeau resigned as his leader Monday. Hanley was just one of more than a dozen Liberals calling for Trudeau to step down last month, saying he didn't see any viable path forward.
There's a reflection of gratitude for all that he has done, at the same time recognizing that this is the right time to move on.
Hanley says proroguing Parliament until March 24th is a logical move because the House was in a state of paralysis for weeks. But some work will continue, says Inuit Tapari Kanatami President Natan Obed, including the selection of an ambassador to lead the Arctic foreign policy.
We have every expectation to co-develop that role with the Government of Canada in the next 2 months.
In the Northwest Territories, the Grand Chief of the Dehcho First Nations, Herb Norwegian, says he was hoping Trudeau would sign a land claim with his people.
We're constantly explaining and clarifying what it is that we mean and how we fit into this part of the country. And
Norwegian says he hopes the next leader will take reconciliation seriously.
The person that comes around is going to have to really roll his sleeves up and really deal with the issue.
And another issue important to Northerners, their changing climate. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Rescue workers in Tibet use their hands to remove large pieces of debris after an earthquake. They are searching for people trapped inside a now collapsed building. At least 95 people were killed when the earthquake hit early Tuesday morning. Officials say that number will likely rise. At least 130 people have been injured. The 7.1 quake damaged more than 1,000 homes in the mountainous region. The earthquake was so strong it woke up people in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, about 230 kilometers away from the epicenter. The U.S. Capitol is preparing to receive the casket of Jimmy Carter. The former president's services will move from his home state of Georgia to Washington, D.C. today. He will lie in state ahead of Thursday's funeral. President Joe Biden has declared January 9th a national day of mourning. Steve Futterman has more from Atlanta.
Long-standing traditions will continue today as Jimmy Carter's body travels to Washington for the final time. The former president's flag-draped casket will leave the Carter Center here in Atlanta this morning. It will then be placed on board one of the presidential planes. For this trip, though, the plane will not be called Air Force One, but rather Special Air Mission 39, to commemorate Carter being the 39th president. Throughout the night, even in temperatures near freezing, a steady flow of people walked past the casket.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, this kind of experience.
This woman brought her 2 young children. She said it was emotional.
He was truly a man who lived a good life and put people first, and that's what matters.
After arriving in Washington, the casket will be placed on a horse-drawn caisson and travel up Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution Avenue to the U.S. Capitol. It will then be taken by members of the military up the Capitol steps into the rotunda. It will lie in state on the same catafalque that was originally used to hold the casket of Abraham Lincoln. Carter's state funeral will be held on Thursday. It will be attended by Joe Biden, along with former presidents and foreign dignitaries. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Atlanta.
Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of France's far-right National Front, has died. Le Pen was known for extreme rhetoric against immigration and multiculturalism. He was kicked out of the party in 2015 by his daughter, Marine Le Pen. He had been in frail health for some time. Jean-Marie Le Pen was 96 in Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron lays a wreath near the scene of the Charlie Hebdo attack. A ceremony is being held today to mark 10 years since the deadly shootings. It was January 7th, 2015, when 2 gunmen stormed the satirical newspaper's offices. 11 people were killed. A police officer was shot and killed. 2 brothers planned the attack after the paper published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The killing sparked a national debate about the freedom of expression and religion in France. For centuries, the oil from the Bergamot fruit has been used to scent everything from cosmetics to tea. Much of the citrus is grown in Calabria, Italy. And while its rind is used for its refreshing aroma, recent studies have unlocked the benefits of its juice. As Megan Williams reports, it has local producers struggling for control of the brand.
Farm workers snap off gleaming green bergamot fruit in an orchard in southern Italy. The bergamot grown here is a miracle, says head of the Calabrian Bergamot Producers Consortium, Ezio Pizzi. It's the result of the Mediterranean and Ionian seas joining to create a unique microclimate. 20 years ago, Pezzi secured the prized DOP, Protected Designation of Origin status from the EU, to recognize Calabrian bergamot's special qualities. Prosciutto or Parmesan cheese are also DOP. Now he's pushing to expand that status to include the juice, too. For years, locals extracted oil from bergamot peel, but discarded the fruit. But research in the 90s showed a link between bergamot and lower blood pressure and cholesterol, leading new producers like Fabio Trunfio to enter the market. He and others have launched their own bid to have a different EU appellation, IGP, Protected Geographical Indication, for the juice only, a move Bergamot Consortium head Ezio Pizzi is fighting. As bergamot producers jostle for control of their trademark, a larger issue looms. With drought made worse by climate change, branches and leaves are drying, and Calabrians' newfound bounty is under threat. Megan Williams, CBC News, Reggio Calabria.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio. It's your morning show on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm live in downtown Winnipeg. Corey Funk's actually live on location out where you might be grabbing a coffee. He's at the Tim Hortons out in Fort Richmond, which is number 9 Killarney at Pembina Highway. So if you want to head over there and talk politics, or maybe give him a comment or two while you're in line getting your cup of coffee, he'd love to hear from you. We'll touch base with Corey in a moment. Also this hour on the program, one is chair of Manitoba's PC leadership race. One once challenged the leadership of a sitting NDP Manitoba premier, and one is a steadfast capital L Liberal. They are our partisan panel. They will talk about the events of the last 24 hours and Justin Trudeau stepping down as leader of the Liberal Party. Coming up. So stay tuned. We've got that panel between 7:30 and 8. And we'll touch base with Corey, as I mentioned, in a moment. First, let's find out what else is developing in news this morning. Heather Wells is here with other angles on the big story and other news stories as well. Hi there.
Hi there. Well, a political expert says Justin Trudeau could not possibly have won the next election and would be seen by the Americans as a lame duck prime minister. University of Manitoba professor emeritus Paul Thomas says the Liberals needed a break and don't have a lot of time in terms of coming to terms with incoming U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and getting ready for the next federal election. Manitoba's premier says Trudeau's resignation isn't slowing down his efforts to forge important trade relationships with Americans. Wab Kinew is in North Dakota today, where he will talk trade with the new governor of that state. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into your actual morning forecast here. It is lightly snowing out there, and otherwise, what's up for the day, Abby?
Yeah, I just hope you remember to unplug your cars before you drive off today. Though up north, let's just still talk about conditions in Churchill. We have that extreme cold warning due to that very cold air mass bringing temperatures down into the regular temperatures in the Churchill region. We're seeing minus 30s already. Now, combined with the westerly winds that is being felt, that the wind chill could feel as cold as minus 50 this morning in a lot of regions around Churchill. And these extreme cold conditions will start to ease later in the morning as temperatures slowly will be rising. So everyone for now is at risk. You need to cover exposed skin to avoid frostbite, which can happen quickly. Let's come down south. Winnipeg at minus 17 at this time. Light snow falling outside. We're seeing some cloudy conditions with this light snow this morning. We will see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds. The winds will shift to light northerly breeze later in the day. Temperatures will fall to minus 21 this morning before gradually rising. Though for this morning, the wind chill for the southern part of the province is feeling around minus 30. And for the afternoon period, it's going to be around minus 25. So risk of frostbite is still in play. We're looking at these similar cold conditions and light snow transitioning to a mix of sun and clouds in most of the southern regions from Brandon all the way down to Gimli. But Churchill is the concern this morning with ice crystals and wind chills feeling like minus 50.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thanks, Massey.
We do have something developing in traffic here. We have Broadway and Osborne. A stalled car. Northbound middle lane is blocked because of it. Expect delays for northbound traffic. Otherwise, a solid winter drive and a good commute by bike. We got a call about that. 788-3093 if you do want to give us an update that will help others on their morning commute. Corey Funk is live this morning at the Tim Hortons at 9 Killarney at Pembina, just taking the temperature on what is a historic day and a historic start to the day in Canadian politics. Of course, this year we are, no matter what, going to have a new Prime Minister of this country because of Justin Trudeau and his resigning as Liberal leader yesterday. That will take effect once a new leader is chosen, and then he has also said he will resign as Prime Minister once all of this is decided moving forward, a new leader is chosen. So, Corey is there, and you've been talking to some folks, Corey?
Yeah, I've been chatting to a few people, and the resounding sentiment from folks here at Tim Hortons this morning is that it's about time. That's what everyone's been telling me. Rob, for example, told me he actually waited too long, that he should have resigned earlier, just to give room for the Liberals to have more time to compete in the next election. He's still open to voting for the Liberals, but he says it's really going to come down to who they choose to be the next leader. And he's concerned that with this kind of short period of time leading up to potentially a spring election, it's not going to be enough to find the right person. That the person they do have won't be a strong candidate. So that's the kind of ongoing sentiment going on right now here at Tim's.
I have to say here in the studio, times are pretty good behind the scenes because May McKillop's directing for you while you're out there.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And she just made me pressed coffee in a Bodum with vanilla cream.
She did that for me the other day too, and I have to say I was saying like, man, I got to really step it up when I'm directing now, and this is going to be really tough for me.
Well, if she did that for you too, apparently I need to be doing this. Maybe we should be doing this for each other, or we should lobby to get May on our regular early crew.
I think so.
Thank you, Corey, for the perspective. I know you're continuing to hear from people, both who are coming through, getting their coffee, and if they want to come on air as well. So we'll touch base with you.
Yeah, thanks, Marcy.
So all kidding aside around the coffee, although it is really good coffee, I want to share some more comments here to build on what Corey was saying. So these ones are coming from my Facebook page. I asked yesterday, what do you need in the next Prime Minister? Sky Scarlett wrote in, someone who actually knows how to live means. Pierre. He has to get in. I do not understand how Canadians live and support their families. Sky writes, the cost of living, taxes, all that has to go down. We need someone who actually will do that for us, not someone, again, like Trudeau, who was born with a silver spoon. Rick Koss writing in a few things. He actually numbered them. He said, number one, I need someone who believes that they serve the people of Canada, all of the people, not the particular party whose jersey they wear. Number two, he writes, someone who understands that the needs of the country as a whole take precedence over the wants of a particular region or interest group. And number three, understand that ideology is a tool, not a mandate. And lastly, he writes, leaders, and this includes all of our elected officials, are called to a much, much higher standard than those they lead. Sadly, I don't see that person on the political scene currently. And finally, Mark Chapman saying, change the system, not just the players. So a lot of people disengaged overall, with the system as well. So if you want to weigh in this morning, lines are open, 788-3205. Here's what some people on the streets of Winnipeg said to Jim Agapito about all this. Pardon me, not on the streets. Yesterday, he was speaking with students at the University of Manitoba about this.
My name's Eric Hakinen. I feel like he stepped down because of several decisions he made, one of them being the tax that he just removed. I feel like he cannot cooperate and hold that tax accountable against himself, so he's going to step down. He wants someone else to have to re-add that tax and not have that pressure bared away from him. It's not on him.
You're referring to the GST, what's called the GST holiday?
Yeah.
Why do you feel that way?
Because what's the point in doing it when it's people are already taxed so much on their taxes and we're just taking it away for a few months, an experiment, right? So I feel like it doesn't really add any value as inflation's going to go up over time and prices are going to start to rise again.
Victoria Romero. Well, I think like most Canadians, we've realized it's a very historic moment, regardless of your opinion on our leader. But I think that while this is something that certainly to me doesn't come as a surprise, it's been a long time coming, I think it is a very necessary step in delivering on what Canadians need. And not just in the sense of those who have called for him to resign, but also purely for the fact that over the last couple months, there has been a severe lack in the ability of our government to pass any policy, to get any work done because of the filibustering, because of the non-confidence votes, because of the resignation of multiple members of the Liberal Party. So it really says a lot about what happens when there isn't change in a political system that's as dynamic as ours.
My full name is Yusuf Mahmoud. I think it's a good thing. Change is always good. Even if it's sudden, it would be good. Well, I'm kind of neutral. I don't think he had much effect on Canada. He may have not done much to Canada, but hopefully the next president or the next prime minister will do better. So yeah.
I feel like it doesn't impact me as much as more. It would impact my parents more because they deal with more of the taxes, more of the adult things, whereas I'm just starting my first year in university, right?
So do you think that this change will help the Liberals at all in the upcoming election?
I think that it might be a little bit too little too late. While I think it is the right decision, I do think that the leader is one thing, but the policy of the party is another. And if the Liberals aren't able to correct their policy to match what Canadians are now asking for and now need, then regardless of who the leader is, they won't be able to recover.
Okay, say, for example, Victoria, an election was held tomorrow. What would your leanings be?
It's a tricky question. A lot of the three parties, they offer a wide variety of options for students, for young people. As a woman, a racialized woman, someone who identifies as non-binary as well, and a part of the LGBTQ community, I think that I would never vote Conservative. And I don't think that a Pierre Poilievre government would be beneficial for a large majority of the country.
Mostly concerned about the immigration laws and the economy of Canada. Like, I came here since it's a better economy from where I'm coming, so I thought here the job opportunities would be more, would give us more opportunities to succeed in life. So that's my main concern right now. But I think it will get better over time. Well, if it's a conservative government, probably the immigration process would be very hard on me. Like, it will become harder on all immigrants and not just students. So that would mainly affect me, but I think overall if I stick to the rules and move as good as possible, I won't have any issues, even with a conservative government.
So that's CBC's Jim Agapito speaking to students at the University of Manitoba. So, of course, this story continues to develop. Go to cbc.ca/Manitoba and cbc.ca nationally to find out more about how things are moving this morning. And then coming up, our partisan panel is going to join us right after your 7:30 news. And just a reminder, Corey's out talking to folks at the Tims this morning, too, at 9 Killarney at Pembina out in Fort Richmond. Time now for a little bit of music on CBC. This one comes from Jessica Smith, who actually goes by the stage name Big Pig. She's an Irish singer and she's a rapper. She's based out of West London. And Smythe, I said Smith, but it's Smythe. Smythe's toured with some pretty big names in British music already. But she's set to release her debut album. It's called 1111 in February. This tune's called Ponytail. singer and rapper based out of West London. This is Jessica Smythe. She goes by Big Pig. The tune's called Ponytail. It's like we're at the club, Scott Regerer. What kind of moves?
A lot of visuals there.
What kind of moves you got?
Well, I don't know. I was a little frightened there because I found myself doing the desk dance.
I know.
And then I realized I might be on a camera right now, so I shut it down pretty quickly.
I just got
Inside,
caught
though,
doing
I'm
it.
pumped.
Do you ever see yourself doing it, and then you go, "Oh no"? Yeah.
Maybe once or twice.
Yeah, there I am, grooving along, feeling cool, looking the complete opposite.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, let's talk about hockey. After a few days off, the Jets are back in action tonight.
Yeah, and after a few losses in a row now, Marcy, Winnipeg's probably pleased that they're taking on the lowly Nashville Predators this evening. Winnipeg should be well rested. They haven't played since that loss to Detroit on Saturday night, after which Coach Scott Arniel was looking forward to a break.
I told them that's the big thing, just rest. Make sure that we look after ourselves. Once they do get some rest, we can get some off-ice work in there. We'll throw some of that in, then get a couple of practices where we get to get some touches that aren't morning skates where it's limited. Just the biggest thing for us is we need some people to get healthy. Lost another defenseman, so that's going to change things again.
Yeah, that defenseman Arniel referenced was Colin Miller, who left Saturday's match early after taking a puck to the throat. Arniel describes the injury as quite serious, but there has been no further update from the club on if or how much time Miller might miss because of it. Puck drop tonight, Marcy, is 7 o'clock.
All right, let's get to basketball. The Raptors had all of their starters healthy for the first time this season. So how'd they do against Milwaukee?
Not very well. Despite having their big three, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and R.J. Barrett sharing the floor for the first time in months, they still got trounced by 24 points. Barrett, who returned after a few games out with an illness, was asked why.
We were playing a certain way. People have been in and out of the lineup. Now that everybody's back, I think it changes things just for the group, figuring out a way to get used to each other again. But tonight, I don't think was about us getting used to each other. I think we just didn't play hard enough. So that's disappointing.
Yeah, the members of BBQ, that's Barnes, Barrett, and Quickley, RJ was least responsible for them getting smoked last night. He finished with 25 points. They will try their luck again tomorrow when they face the Knicks in New York, hoping to avoid a 14th loss in 15 games.
Let's finish with golf. There's an innovative new league that begins play today. I am not sold on this. I'm putting it out there. It's virtual, right? Is that what we're talking about?
So this is called TGL, which stands for Tomorrow's Golf League. It's designed to combine the latest in golf technology with in-person competition. Thus, there's going to be a shot clock, timeouts, and both team and individual match play. Among those participating, Marcy, is current world number 7, Wyndham Clark.
It's unbelievable that you can hit a shot, it responds perfectly, you turn around, they point exactly to where you're on the green rotates. All of that stuff it's just amazing where we are with technology. You never know what this thing could be. This could be the future of golf. This could be one of the coolest things on Monday nights after football, and that's the hope. And so I just wanted to be a part of it.
Also a part of it, legends Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, co-founders actually. McIlroy is going to play for the Boston Golf Club, while Woods will suit up for Jupiter Links. This is a lot to process. And reception to the league online, Marcy's been mixed. Some are calling it gimmicky, go figure, comparing it to an indoor pro football league. Others say TGL could flourish, especially since Woods will not have to put his surgically repaired body through miles and miles of walking. So we'll see. The league's marketers, though, have been busy, that's for sure. They point out that the sand being used has been taken from the bunkers at the Masters and Augusta National, and that the simulators being employed are equivalent in size to 3 T-Rexes.
Nice. That's a T-Rex roar, I'm guessing.
Authentic.
Could you
T-Rex
and
roar.
Do you think they'll be able to tell that the sand is from the Masters bunkers? I don't know.
I don't think that it matters.
I don't
just
know.
think that they want people like me to talk about it on air.
And here we
to
are.
try to attract more. And here we are. Tomorrow's Golf League starts today.
We'll see if it finds an audience. I'd love to play it, though, frankly. All right. Thanks a lot, Scott. Take care.
You bet.
It's Scott Regare with Morning Sports. Well, coming up after 7:30, it's party time. Our partisan political panel will join us to hash out the events of the last 24 hours through their Manitoba lens and their party lenses. Stay tuned. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 17 right now. Temperature's not going to rise, at least not before it falls, falling to minus 21 this morning, and then the temperature rises. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon, much warmer tomorrow. The race is on to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader and Canada's next Prime Minister. So far, no one has officially declared they're running. David Hurley is a veteran Liberal Party campaign organizer.
The odds of the Liberal Party winning this election are pretty remote, but it is quite possible in my mind for the Liberal Party to, at the end of the election, be at 30-some points with 100 and some seats, because right now we're in an artificial world. 45% of Canadians are not conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre is currently getting the votes of people who disagree with him. And he's getting them because people hate Justin Trudeau.
Last night, Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada governor, released a statement saying he will consider his decision whether to run with his family over the coming days. A political expert says Justin Trudeau's resignation and the pause on Parliament will help the Liberals. University of Manitoba Professor Emeritus Paul Thomas says Trudeau would have become a lame duck Prime Minister. Thomas says there's been no progress on any significant legislation for a long time. He says Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has attacked Trudeau every day and further eroded his popularity.
They need a break. They need some time to get their act together to deal with Trump. They need to sort out their internal divisions because those are real. I mean, it's not like this is all about the personality and image and electability of the Prime Minister. There are also internal policy disagreements.
And as the federal Liberal Party heads towards a leadership race, industry leaders in Manitoba want the country's next leader to hear their concerns. They worry U.S. President-elect Trump and his threats of 25% tariffs on Canadian imports will hurt business in this province. Andrea Ladouceur is president of Bioscience Association of Manitoba.
Life sciences or biosciences is part of, the science and the availability of things that help us heal, feed, and fuel our world. So whether it's innovative medicines or new way of producing our food, we want to make sure that the leadership of our country and of our province understands the economic and also the innovation importance that comes from this sector.
Medications, both prescription and over-the-counter, are Manitoba's biggest export to the U.S. in terms of dollars. The province exported $2.3 billion worth of medicine to the U.S. in 2023. Manitoba's premier says Justin Trudeau's resignation is not slowing down his efforts to forge important trade relationships with Americans. Wab Kinew is in North Dakota today, where he will talk trade with the new governor. Kinew has also spoken with the governor of Wisconsin and the outgoing U.S. ambassador to Canada. He says none of them wants the extra costs that go along with Donald Trump's proposed tariffs.
There's a lot of good work that these efforts we're expending in the U.S. right now will have to ensure that our economic interests, in terms of your jobs, in terms of continuing to grow as an exporting province, can move forward even as we navigate this period of turbulence and uncertainty.
Kinew says other premiers have also picked up the trade torch and are meeting with U.S. officials. In other news, a new Manitoba teacher registry allows anyone to see if a teacher has been suspended or if they can no longer teach in this province. The government made it public yesterday. The registry does not state the reasons why a teacher has been disciplined. Krista Hurd once had to take her kids out of school over concerns about inappropriate behavior by a teacher. Hurd doesn't think the database goes far enough to keep students safe.
If somebody is suspended for honoring a student's pronouns versus trying to give them back massages, I see a difference in that, right? And I would like to see on the registry itself what the cause is for that suspension or that termination.
The registry makes the province one of a handful in Canada to disclose such information to the public. The former home of a Winnipeg church went up in flames yesterday evening for the first time since October 2021. It happened the night before Orthodox Christmas. Firefighters spent all evening battling the blaze at the Point Douglas building on Euclid. It used to house the Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church congregation. Stephanie Sarlakis is the church's secretary.
We're not surprised. It's sad, and the timing is really terrible because it's actually Orthodox Christmas. So, when we're supposed to be celebrating with our families, we're kind of all glued to our phones and watching kind of this unfold again.
Sarlakis says they moved out of that building following the third fire in June of last year. The cause of the fire last night is still under investigation. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's go to Abby Adeyemi to talk about today's forecast. Everyone's kind of easing in. Sometimes I think Monday is easier after the holiday break and the kids are back than Tuesday because it's sort of like, oh, we still have to keep doing this.
Yeah, the rush, the reality sets in on Tuesday.
Right?
Monday is just like, we're still coming out of the weekend. We're going to get it right. But then Tuesday go, really?
I know.
When is Friday going to come around?
I know, especially after the holiday break. Now, you're going to have to wrap the kids up because it's cold this morning.
Yeah, it's cold across board. But up north, we're having that extremely cold along the Hudson Bay coast this morning, impacting Churchill and surrounding area. The forecast has it that it's dangerously cold with the wind chills feeling like minus 50 today, though that's going to ease as you get closer to the noon period. Temperatures will drop to will be easing up for folks up there. Down south in the Red River Valley region, we're looking at Winnipeg around minus 17 at this time. Light snow falling, cloudy skies with this light snow this morning. Then we'll be seeing a mix of sun and clouds later. Temperatures drops to around minus 21, but the wind chill for this morning in Winnipeg is going to be feeling like minus 30. And these cloudy conditions is going to be hanging around with us into the overnight period. In other regions, we're seeing these cloudy conditions and expect a cold one, though a transition to a mix of sun and clouds in most of the regions from the western part of the province to the Parkland into Lake. We should be seeing a mix of sun and clouds later. But the further north you go, that's where you get to see the extreme cold today, especially in Churchill with wind chills near minus 50. So, Mercy, do I want to say weather in Winnipeg compared to what's happening in the north is better?
Yeah, well, it is.
Because I know it's cold, but comparing to how cold it is up north, I think we have a good day today.
Yeah, and if you've been in Churchill with that kind of cold I have, it's the real deal.
And frostbite is a thing, so take it easy out there.
The wind whipping off the bay. Beautiful place to live, though, man. All right, let's have a look at traffic here. I mentioned we have Broadway and Osborne stalled car, northbound middle lane blocked. So expect delays for northbound traffic. That's just about the worst spot I think a car could stall. So call us, though, if there's an update to that, because that was a little bit ago, and I'm just not seeing any updates right now. But give us a call, 788-3093. And also, if you're walking or biking, we'd like to hear from you what conditions are like for you out there. Most people biking we did here this morning was pretty clear, so that's good, bike lanes. Let's go to Corey Funk now. So we have been talking about, obviously, Justin Trudeau's announced departure, his pending resignation as Prime Minister of Canada, his resignation as the Liberal Party leader already in play. So Corey is out at the Tim Hortons. He's at 9 Killarney at Pembina Highway, and he's been talking to some voters today and some Manitobans. What are you hearing?
Yeah, so still everyone I spoke with, they say it's about time, but they're all coming from different perspectives. So, for example, Terry, who I spoke with, he's a Liberal voter. He plans to vote Liberal pretty much no matter what, but he just thinks, it was about time for him to go for the sake of the party itself. But for him, as he looks forward to the leadership race, it's kind of a matter of whether he'll hold his nose and vote Liberal or not. He wants to see a leader, and he didn't specify who, but someone who he's just proud to vote for in the next coming election. So that's going to be a big thing for him as he looks forward, but he does plan to vote Liberal no matter what. I also spoke with Sasawat, and this is really interesting. He was saying that it was actually the process of buying a home for him that led him to already make his decision, who he's already knows he's going to vote for no matter what how the Liberal race goes. He plans to vote for Pierre Poilievre because of his message on housing affordability, and it's going to take a lot for the Liberal Party to change his mind. So those are the two people I spoke with, but overall still sentiment is that it was time for Trudeau to go. We'll see what happens in terms of this leadership race and how it affects people's decisions in the future.
Now, you're talking to people as they're waiting in line there, grabbing their coffees and on the road to work or school. So obviously you're summarizing comments. But if you want to go down there and be part of the broadcast, Corey's there for the remainder of the show. And so we'll get you on air if you can stick around, or you can just share some comments.
Would love to have you on. Come on down.
I have a funny comment I want to share with you, Corey. I actually asked people on my Facebook page, what are they looking for in the next prime minister, whoever that's going to be. So I'll leave you with this. Vic Mikolenko wrote in, given our propensity to get excited about celebrities, how about one of the two Ryans? One of the two, like Ryan Gosling or Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
No. I don't know. I want them to stay doing movies, personally speaking. So
yeah, that makes sense.
If you got some weighing in that you want to do, please check out Corey at Tim's down there in Fort Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Corey Funk's live for the rest of the morning. Let's read some more serious comments here before we turn to our partisan panel. Catherine Barron says, it's interesting times if Pierre Poilievre gets in and lives up to his slogans. Does that mean back to full fossil fuel consumption, axe the electric car battery deals, cut daycare? So what rights as a woman have I taken for granted that could be at risk? So Catherine is worried. Other people saying they want Pierre Poilievre in. Other people saying anyone but a Liberal. Valinda Bennett saying a mature individual who places Canada first instead of his pocketbook. Baba G. Manitoba saying someone we can trust, and so far there's no one in any party trustworthy. A lot of you are writing and really unimpressed, saying that you don't actually trust the system, saying that you don't see anybody in the system that you would trust. And finally here, a few more. Tim Friesen's comment. Tim wrote, fiscal conservatism while promoting our incredible diversity. It's interesting Trudeau is staying in the interim. The candidates to be next Liberal leader are going to face the same dilemma that Kamala Harris did when she refused to disavow Biden's policies. His unpopularity means they're going to need to differentiate themselves, but any attempt to do so is going to create problems for the PM. Trudeau strayed a long way, he says, from the Liberal brand with his wild spending over 10 years, including the pre-COVID period. So I'll leave those comments there. We have some analysis to come here on the show, some deeper analysis of Justin Trudeau's announced departure and pending resignation as Prime Minister of Canada. So the questions that we're going to delve into are, how did Manitoba fare under his leadership? What is next for the Liberal Party? And of course, how are the other two major parties positioned for the 2025 election? Our partisan panel's here live in Studio 15. Brad Zander is a lawyer and Manitoba representative on the National Constitution Committee for the Federal Conservatives. He's also, interestingly, chair of Manitoba's provincial PC leadership race. Good morning.
Good morning.
So Erin Selby's here too, former provincial NDP cabinet minister of health and education. She was MP for Southdale. She was also part of a group of 5 that challenged Sellinger's leadership, which I think is interesting in the context of the feds. And she ran federally for the NDP. She's now director of regulatory affairs at Assiniboine College. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Hannah Mihaichuk-Marshall is back, Liberal campaign manager and voter. She's been involved in past federal campaigns. And of course, her mother was an MLA and an MP for the Liberals. You might recognize the Mihaichuk name. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy. Glad to be here.
All right, I'm going to get you to lean into your mic, Hannah, so we can hear you a little better. All right, one word for how we're all feeling. It's been 24 hours since we heard this news. I'll let you start first, Hannah.
Relief.
Relief, okay.
Optimistic.
Erin's optimistic. Brad.
Hannah took mine, which is interesting that the Conservative and Liberal on this panel are agreeing. Relief.
Are both relieved. So let's dig into why you're relieved. Brad, I'll let you go first.
I think the writing has been on the wall for this for a year, if not 2, and I think it's time to move on from the internal party politics within the Liberal Party, resolve this issue so that the government of Canada, whichever government that is, can focus on the big issues that our country's facing, not the least of which is in 2 weeks staring down a potential crippling tariff regime by the United States, the new United States administration. So. Relief that we're finally at the stage that we can get over the internal Liberal melodrama, but this should have happened a long time ago, and it's the responsibility of the current Prime Minister and the MLA or MPs and cabinet ministers around him that this has taken as long as it has.
Hannah, why are you relieved?
You know, I
as grateful as I am for everything that the Prime Minister has accomplished, and that should not be understated. It has been a fantastic track record. I just think that him staying on to this point has been too distracting politically. And even just what was going on in Parliament, we weren't having a functional legislature passing legislation that Canadians desperately needed. So getting this out of the way, going through this leadership process, I think it will not only revigorate the Liberal Party, it will refocus us all on what matters, and that's what the Liberals have been focused on, and now we can all work together.
It's interesting because the analyst we had on earlier this morning said that one of the things that was notable to him was no matter how any other sort of political leader has left, there was no mention of legacy by the other parties yesterday. They were all moving forward. They didn't look to say anything. Usually there's a thank you for what, the 10 years that you've been there. But that was sort of missing. Like, we're right moving forward. Almost in election mode already, which makes sense, I guess. Erin, you said optimistic, right?
Optimistic because there are voters who traditionally vote Liberal who are not going to be able to do that this time. They've decided that this is not their Liberal Party, and they definitely aren't going to vote for the current Conservative that is too far right for them. So some of those folks will lend us their vote. So I'm looking forward to seeing us picking up some seats.
When you think about the question I asked about Manitoba, what was the good or what was the bad? I'm going to be generous and let you guys pick what you want to answer of Manitoba and how we fared under Justin Trudeau. Brad?
I think that it's the concern that you hear from folks in the coffee shop with your colleague. This has been a Prime Minister who not that long after getting into office, answered a question saying, I don't really think about, financial matters or monetary policy. That's not really something that's my focus. And I think that the financial circumstances that we find ourselves in, that Canadians and Manitobans find themselves in, is reflective of the fact that just was not a focus, not something that that was top of mind. We've seen this Prime Minister lose two credible finance ministers, Bill Morneau, Chrystia Freeland. These are people who could not go along with his agenda, and I think that Manitobans and Canadians across the country are paying the consequences for that. So I think a missed decade of fiscal mismanagement is going to be his, unfortunately, his long-standing legacy.
What do you think in terms of Manitoba? What was the good and the bad of the Liberals governing under Trudeau for Manitoba?
The good was the coalition with the NDP. So the Liberals have had many, many years, many times in government to be able to do some of the things they did this time, but they only got it done when the NDP forced them on childcare, on dental coverage, on housing. So I think that was the best thing, is that they were forced to do some of the things that they've talked about, but we've always committed to.
Having said that, though, could that backfire in an election this year if people say, well, now the NDP need to distinguish themselves from the Liberals? And what does that look like? Where are those differentiation points in your view for your party?
I think one of the different points is that we actually get those things done. And I'm not worried about people confusing the NDP and the Liberal. Right now, people know who the Liberals are and they don't like them.
Hannah, what do you think? I'll give you the same thing. I was going to ask you just for the bad, but I'll be fair. What do you think the best thing that happened under the Liberals was under Trudeau, and where did they start to really lose it? Was it, as Brad said, this whole thing that he could never shake, which was he's a person of privilege and can't understand the average person, that's here in the prairies waking up in Manitoba today?
Well, talk about privilege. Some of the other leaders of these political parties are some of the most out of touch. Unfortunately, it does seem to come with the trade a little bit, so I don't think that is quite fair. I think what my fellow panelists might call have trouble with in terms of fiscal, I think that this government has made record investments in things like, specifically, we're talking about Manitoba, the Churchill Rail. Right? Ask anyone in Churchill about the economic system and the economic situation up there. We've made record investments in that part of Manitoba. Child poverty. We had one of the highest rates of child poverty in the country. Last time I checked, we were at 750,000 children in Canada lifted out of poverty just with one policy from Justin Trudeau. That is astounding. You never mind childcare, Indigenous reconciliation, the most robust plan for climate change in history.
So you feel the record has something to be celebrated?
Absolutely.
On the points that aren't to be celebrated, where people really didn't like Trudeau, they don't think anyone's going to, be able to, in the next leader, whoever that is, of the Liberal Party, what do they have to do to differentiate themselves to convince Canadians that they are not more of the same?
I think a lot of it is a personal issue. Of course, no government is perfect. No one has ever claimed that. I think we can be proud of what the Liberals have done, but I think, like I was saying earlier, a lot of what the issue is with Justin Trudeau personally, and that has been a bit of a distraction. I'm not saying that any potential candidate wouldn't want to differentiate themselves, but I think they also need to be proud of what it means to be a Liberal, and I think that has maintained throughout his tenure before that, and it will maintain after.
So this is like this. It's interesting because I think that there's we're kind of also in this moment where politics have changed so much that I wonder about all those differences. What does it mean to be a Liberal? What does it mean to be an NDP voter? What does it mean to be a Conservative? Now we know what it means to be a Conservative and a Liberal or an NDP, or you can see those differentiations. The question is are we in for a divisive election no matter what, like a really ugly, divisive moment? And I'll ask you this, Brad, because you're chairing the leadership race for the PCs. And I mean, already here it's been divisive in Manitoba. Party member Darren Penner was questioning why candidate Obicom was photographed with Justin Trudeau. So are we in you're with us or against us moment here? What do you think we're going to see federally?
As chair of the provincial race, I'm not going to comment on...
No, I'm not asking for that. Yeah, I understand.
I mean, politics is divisive, and campaigns are an opportunity for political candidates and parties to put out competing visions. I mean, to look at the polling number, this may arguably be one of the least divisive elections where a government leaves office. I mean, we're coming up on 2 years of the current government polling 15, 20 points behind. I mean, there is a large portion of this country from coast to coast to coast, and we're seeing it in places like Toronto that do want to change. So I do think there is a large number of Canadians who are rallying around what Pierre Poilievre is calling for, which is a new government.
Why is he right to be the next prime minister in your view?
I think I have been impressed with his, call it laser focus on what I think are key issues. That includes housing, that includes inflation. I think there has been a tendency to look back from members of the other political parties. There was a time where maybe he played a bit more of an attack dog role and sort of what was a bit of played that role in the House. I've been very impressed since he became leader of the party.
You think he's changed?
I think he has. I think he has matured into the role, and I think that he has. I think in particular his focus on.
These guys are making furious notes over here, by the way. I will get to you, I promise.
That's absolutely fine. I think in the time that he's been the leader of the party, his focus on issues that matter to Canadians, and again, you're hearing that from the voters, housing, inflation. I think that does show a level of maturity and a level of seriousness and understanding with the problems that
a lot of people writing
in,
feeling that they connect with them. I think Corey was mentioning a man who's saying, he's going to he's voting for Poilievre. He trusts some of his fiscal policies, which continue to come up.
I think also, just an understanding of the way that we communicate now. I mean, I think he's been doing that effectively in a way that the current.
What do you mean by that?
I think his ability to connect with people on social media and understand how that tool can be used. I mean, it's important. That's how we communicate today, and I think he's been very effective at doing that.
So you guys have been dying to get in. So I'll go to Aaron first here. What are you thinking as you're thinking about leadership? And also, obviously, the Conservatives right now, I mean, if there was an election tomorrow, they would overwhelmingly win by the polls, at least, right? So what are your thoughts?
I think the polls sometimes reflect that people are angry at their current government, but when they actually start to think about who they're going to vote for, do they want to vote for Trump Jr.? No, I don't think so. And they know they're not happy with this Liberal government. So I think we're in a good place right now.
Is it fair to call him Trump Jr.? How's that sitting with you, Brad?
It doesn't sit very well with me, and I don't think it is. I mean, this is a leader in a party that's on issues like Ukraine stood steadfast with the efforts in Ukraine, on any number of social issues, there's not alignment between sort of what you'd call the mega base and where Pierre Poilievre is. So I don't think that's fair. But I think what we do need in this country is a leader who has a mandate from the people and who can stand up to Donald Trump in the face of these 25% tariffs. And what we're left with now, as we enter a 3-month leadership race, is a period where we have a lame duck prime minister and a government that will not be focused on addressing what is one of, if not the largest economic challenges this country has potentially ever faced. And that's down to Justin Trudeau's ego and the Liberal Party for putting us in this position at this late stage. We should be all hands on deck, getting ready to deal with the incoming Donald Trump administration.
And I know you're worried about the states. Yeah. You were tweeting about that as well. I was noticing retweeting about that. That's top of mind for you.
Should be for all Canadians, I think.
I do want to get to the race itself, because I know that, Hannah, you have said, and I'll ask Aaron, both of you this, you've talked about, some potentials. You said you don't have a clear person that you would be looking for to leader, but I mean, obviously, Jolie's name, Chrystia Freeland's name coming up. I'm asking about this to both of you because there's the whole glass cliff thing, that when a woman gets in leadership, it's when something is in a moment of crisis. And I wonder whether or not that's something that you're thinking about for the Liberals right now. And then I'll go to you, Aaron.
I think that is an issue that we have in society. I mean, look at Kim Campbell with the Conservatives back in the day. That was a pretty classic case of...
Some could argue Heather Stephenson here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I made that argument when it happened. I think that's absolutely something. But when we're talking about some of the talent, like Chrystia Freeland, like Anita Anand, like Melanie Joly, I think that they are more than competent. I think they are extraordinary. They would be extraordinary leaders. And I think any single one of them have the talent and the focus to take on Pierre Poilievre, who I agree is a threat to our country. I mean, we talk about maturity and seriousness, but anybody can come up with 3-word slogans, right? It's easy. Alliteration is fun. Petulant Pierre. See, right? Like, it's easy. But we need to have a grown-up in the room, and I just don't see that being Pierre Poilievre. I think he's divisive. I think he's been nasty at times. I don't think that's gone away, and that's something that scares me, and I think any one of the candidates or potential candidates can handle that easily.
I knew we ran out the clock, so Aaron, you're getting the last 30 seconds here. And, why is your party the one to lead Canada? Or if you want to weigh in on the glass cliff, I'm going to let you weigh in on whatever you want.
I'll weigh in on both. Why are we the party? Because everything that Justin Trudeau is claiming as his legacy is the stuff he did because he was forced to by our party. The NDP are the one that made that happen. In terms of women coming in as leaders when the party is doomed, you're right, Marcy, that's been the history in Canada. Party politics aside, I would really like to see that change.
Thank you all for being here. Obviously, it's not the last time we'll all be together talking. Appreciate it. Brad, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Aaron, Hannah, thank you.
My pleasure.
So that's our partisan panel for this morning. Brad Zander, who is a local lawyer, Manitoba representative on the National Constitution Committee for the Federal Conservatives. Aaron Selby, former provincial NDP cabinet minister, director of Regulatory Affairs at Assiniboine College. And Hannah Hychuk-Marshall, Liberal campaign manager and voter, been involved in past federal campaigns as well. So where do we go from here? Well, call us, 788-3205 if you want to weigh in. Heather's here with headlines.
Manitoba's premier says Justin Trudeau's resignation isn't slowing his efforts to forge important trade relationships with Americans. Wap Kinew is in North Dakota today, where he will talk trade with the state's new governor. At least one parent says the province's new teacher registry doesn't go far enough to keep students safe. Krista Hurd says the new registry needs to state the nature of a teacher's action that prompted their suspension. We'll hear more in our next Manitoba News at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather. All right, it's minus 17 in Winnipeg, and the temperature is going to fall actually to minus 21 if you need us on the commute. 788-3093. Coming up, we'll check in with Corey Funk, who's live at Tim's, talking politics this morning. He's at Killarney and Pembina Highway in Fort Richmond. Also, in the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to build on that story that Heather's been mentioning in the news, and that is all about what is happening with the new registry for teachers.
Today on Q. I'm Saroja Coelho, sitting in for Tom Power. When violinist Lara St. John was just a teenager, she went through a traumatic experience at the hands of her 78-year-old instructor. Lara talks about how she hopes to make the world of classical music a safer place.
It's so much victim blaming. It's crazy.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation. What's next for the party and for the country as an election looms? We will hear from various perspectives, including from one of Trudeau's former closest advisors. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Liberal Party of Canada needs a new leader, and it has to act fast.
You need to balance both very quick timing and democratic processes.
Not only does the party need a new leader, the party does need to move back to the middle.
We are literally up against the wall here. It's not so much the interests of the Liberal Party that need to play out here, it's the interests of Canada.
Some Liberal MPs have thanked Justin Trudeau for his leadership and for eventually listening to their calls for him to step down. But as David Thurton reports, the pressure is on to find a replacement.
This was not an easy decision for him to come to.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller is a friend of Justin Trudeau, keeping in close contact with the Prime Minister as he came to a difficult decision.
You know, this last little while has been his birthday, Christmas, and his personal holidays with his family. No one should have to think about their future during those periods, but he's had to.
As another Trudeau era closes, attention now turns to who succeeds him. CBC News has learned leadership hopefuls are reaching out to party members and MPs like Samir Zuberi.
I'm sure the phones are being worked right now, and calls are being had.
Almost a dozen names have surfaced to replace Trudeau. In a statement, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney says he is considering a leadership bid. Some MPs want Chrystia Freeland to run. Her sudden resignation from cabinet sparked this round of turmoil for Trudeau. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, according to a source, is very likely to put himself forward. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson is considering a run, multiple sources tell CBC News. Miller himself, Trudeau's friend, says he's not running, but he has this message once a leader emerges.
This is a party that needs to screw its head on straight, that needs to stiffen up, and needs to rally behind a leader.
Because there's not much time with a general election happening as early as this spring. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Government may be prorogued until March, but Canada still has important business to attend to in the next 2.5 months, especially south of the border. Canada's premiers want to make sure the response to Donald Trump's tariff threat is not neglected. They wrote to the Prime Minister yesterday saying Canada needs to demonstrate strength and unity at this time. The premiers have requested regular group meetings with the Prime Minister, beginning with an in-person meeting next week. With that looming tariff threat and Trump's inauguration around the corner, concerns are growing over the impact on Canada's economy. As Katie Simpson reports, Ottawa is showing signs it's ready to retaliate.
What are you looking forward to in 2025?
Well, just a great year. I think we're going to do fantastically well as a country.
As Donald Trump prepares to return to the White House with the mandate given to him by voters, fear is growing in Canada. His mind is made up about tariffs. According to a senior Canadian government source, officials around the Prime Minister are increasingly concerned Trump is ready to follow through on his threat. The president-elect vowed to impose 25% levies on all imports from Canada and Mexico on his first day in office, unless major improvements are made to border security, though recently he's added complaints about the trade deficit with Canada. The source says Trump's language on social media, repeatedly praising tariffs as a tool to generate wealth, is partially why the concern continues to grow. And so Canada is finalizing its retaliation strategy. Expect officials to threaten tariffs on a wide range of American goods, including Florida orange juice, in the days ahead. By choosing an export from Trump's adopted state, it's meant to send a message to those at the new center of American power. But how threats will be received in the U.S. from the Trudeau government as the Prime Minister plans to leave, it could undercut the Canadian message. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The last time Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted to buy Greenland. Danish authorities quickly threw cold water on the idea. Now Trump is back on social media saying, "Make Greenland great again." Today, his son, Donald Trump Jr., is visiting Greenland. It's set to be a private one-day visit. Trump Jr. will reportedly shoot video content for his podcast and will not be meeting any government officials while he's there. At least 95 people are dead after an earthquake in Tibet. It happened in a mountainous region early this morning. Another 130 people were injured. And as aftershocks continue, officials are warning the number of people killed will rise. The CBC's South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji has the latest.
Rescue workers scramble to climb over large piles of rubble, searching through the broken bricks for any survivors. In this remote region near one of Tibet's holiest cities, Shigatse, the death toll keeps climbing after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit, Beijing said. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the quake at a magnitude of 7.1. Some 40 aftershocks also struck soon after, leaving debris from crumbled storefronts all over the roads in the hardest hit area. More than 1,000 homes have been damaged. The ground started to shake violently in the morning, with tremors felt as far away as the Indian state of Bihar and in neighboring Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, some 400 kilometers from the epicenter, where residents rushed out of their homes for safety. I was sleeping when the earthquake hit. I thought my child was moving the bed, this woman says. I'm still shaking from fear and I'm in shock. China has raised its emergency response level to the highest possible, with tens of thousands of tents and blankets dispatched to help as many people as possible before the sun goes down. But the remote terrain, high altitude, and freezing temperatures are expected to slow down rescue efforts in an area prone to devastating earthquakes. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
South Korea's transport minister says he takes responsibility for the Jeju airplane crash last month, and he intends to step down. He says he will resign as soon as the current situation is dealt with. The accident killed 179 people on board the Boeing jet. The transport ministry is promising to overhaul the safety of airport landing systems. There is evidence of a bird strike on one of the engines, but experts believe the design of South Korea's landing systems also contributed to the crash. France is marking 10 years since the Charlie Hebdo attack.
C'est un coup de téléphone, le souvenir le plus fort. Membre de la rédaction de Charlie Hebdo m'appelle alors que je suis déjà informé qu'il y a une attaque sur.
Former French President François Hollande describes a phone call he received after the attack. Two gunmen stormed the offices of the satirical newspaper on January 7, 2015. 11 members of the editorial staff were killed. A police officer was also shot and killed outside the building in Paris. Two brothers planned the attack after the paper published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The killings marked the beginning of 3 days of attacks in France's capital. Another 5 people died. Researchers at Montreal's Insectarium are using artificial intelligence to discover new species. AI is also helping them better understand the effects of climate change on insects. As Kwabena Odora reports, visitors to the Insectarium are also using the technology.
The director of Montreal's Insectarium, Maxime Larivé, says there are millions of species of insects that are yet to be identified, and he's hoping AI will help them discover them.
Before they disappear, we have to find ways to move away from traditional approaches and describe these gems that are still unknown everywhere in the tropical environment.
Researchers at the Insectarium are using the technology in their own research. They use a machine called AMI, automated monitoring of insects. It has a light to attract nocturnal insects, a board for insects to rest, and then a camera takes pictures. The photos are uploaded into a software for researchers to study the results.
We have access to all this information. Everything that we've built is openly accessible and open source for researchers around the world to conduct research and really monitor how biodiversity is changing rapidly across the world.
AI isn't only for research. The museum hopes visitors will pull out their phones and use their mobile app to identify any of the 3,000 plus species in their collection. Larry Vay says it makes visits more informative and more interactive.
We have an AI algorithm that identifies it automatically for them so that they can get a name on it and then dive and build a relationship with that insect and understand where it comes from, what it feeds on, what are its origins.
Larry Vey says the insectarium is working on improving their AI systems so they can increase their ability to identify, understand, and discover new and unknown species. Cubino Duro, CBC News, Montreal.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. It is cold out there today. Hopefully you'll plug the car in. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Well, we are continuing to talk about Justin Trudeau's pending departure as Prime Minister and stepping down as Liberal leader. Corey Funk is live out in Fort Richmond this morning at the Tim's at Killarney and Pembina Highway, and he's going to be joined by a guest who's going to walk through what they're thinking this morning as a Manitoban. In addition to another story this half hour, the disciplinary records of Manitoba teachers, as you've been hearing in the news over the last day here, are now being made public in a brand new online registry. The province hopes the registry will boost safety in Manitoba classrooms. We're going to talk to a parent about how they feel now that the registry is up and running, and also where they already see that it could be improved. So stay tuned, please, for that feature interview. Right now, though, let's dip into other stories and headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's Premier says Justin Trudeau's resignation is not slowing his efforts to forge important trade relationships with the Americans. Wab Kinew is in North Dakota today, where he's going to talk trade with that state's new governor. Kinew's also spoken with the governor of Wisconsin and with the outgoing U.S. ambassador to Canada. He says none of them wants the extra costs that go along with Donald Trump's proposed tariffs. The former home of a Winnipeg church went up in flames yesterday evening for the fourth time since October 2021, and it happened the night before Orthodox Christmas. The building on Euclid used to house the Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church congregation. That church's secretary says it is all bad timing. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is Orthodox Christmas today. It's reminding us that we're at January 7th already. Bitterly cold, especially in the north. Abby's here now with our forecast.
Yes, we're still tracking that extreme cold in the northern part of the province. Churchill on that extreme cold warning due to this cold air mass bringing temperatures in the region. Currently, Churchill is around minus 38, close to minus 39, and that's just the actual temperature. Now, if you combine that with the northwesterly winds that is being felt there, it's feeling near minus 50 and even above this morning, and that is spreading all along the Hudson Bay coast. Now, this extreme cold warning will last until sometime later this morning. Then temperatures will start to warm up. That's the situation up north at this time. But if we come down south, Winnipeg is just seeing light snow falling at this time, minus 17, still tracking that. We'll see some cloudy skies with this light snow this morning. Then it transitions to a mix of sun and clouds later in the day. Temperatures will drop to around minus 21 this morning before rising slightly. Though the wind chill is something to take into consideration as you start your day if you're making the transition from one bus to another, because it feels like minus 30 this morning. And then during your lunch break, the wind chill is going to feel like minus 25. Overall, it's cold across board. We're seeing wind chills in the valleys of minus 30s, which is keeping things chilly.
No doubt. All right. Well, if you're waiting for the bus, Abby's right, you're going to want to bundle up. Also, if you are in the car, note that in traffic, that stalled car is still there on Broadway and Osborne. It's blocking the northbound middle lane, and traffic now at this 8 o'clock hour is backed up past Osborne Bridge. Also, stalled car at the intersection of Notre Dame and King Edward. It's partially blocking northbound and southbound median lanes and the westbound curb lane. So both those areas you might want to avoid. 788-3093 is what the traffic line is, the commuter line, if you do need to reach us. Well, 8:14 is the time right now, and we're asking you online what you are hoping for in the next Prime Minister. And Let's get a few comments on here, and then we'll go back to Corey in a moment here, who's out live this morning in Fort Richmond. So you're writing into our Facebook page, Shelley Mitchell saying a prime minister whose personal holidays don't attract attention and who has a sound knowledge of economics. Obviously not a fan of Trudeau. Morel Lamontagne saying anyone but Poilievre. And Kev Roberts saying it will be amazing to see someone unite our country with so much division. Diane Todd saying someone tough who will stand up for Canada. Glenn, son of Bruce, wrote in, Freeland has the perfect set of skills, in his opinion. Michelle Rybuck saying it's sing for her. Mark Miller, a focus on public health care is needed, not the privatization of health care. So it's interesting because we've got some 100 comments plus, and they're all over the place. But no one seems to be sad to see Trudeau go. Let's go back to Corey at Tim's in Fort Richmond. He's at Pembina and Killarney High, and he's got a special guest whose voice you're going to recognize.
Yes, I do. And it's interesting, those comments, Marcy, because that's the similar sentiment over here, is that, the people are coming from many different political perspectives. I've heard from a lot of people who plan to vote Conservative no matter what. Some people are still holding out, especially to see who the next Liberal leader will be, and because they do want to vote Liberal, but they're just not totally sure. But everyone is on the same page that Trudeau resigning is a good thing. And here with me now, I think he would also agree, is where he's coming from as well. It's Terry McLeod, who, if you're a longtime CBC listener, you may recognize his voice. He did actually once host information radio, and he retired in 2016, and he's here now. Hello, Terry.
Hi, Corey.
And so, Terry, just tell me what's on your mind this morning.
Well, I'm really concerned about how we're going to make a proper decision about not just who replaces Trudeau, but how well this new person will run against Pierre Poilievre, because Poilievre is coming out with his fists flying. And he did that thing with Jordan Peterson recently. So what's going to happen, and who are the possible candidates? Because as I look at the potential candidates, I'd like to see Jim Carr as the leader of the Liberals, but he passed away. But I knew him quite well. He was the member for my riding. And so I knew him, but I've met his son, not so crazy about him. But, so what's going to happen, and what will Trudeau do, or how will the country move on from him? I don't think the country is ready for Poilievre.
And as you look forward to the election coming up, what do you think is, and people you're talking with yourself, what are going to be the big issues on your mind, as a retiree even as well, that are important to you, whether it's election in the spring or in the fall? And as you look forward to who the next Liberal leader might be, what are going to be the things that most resonate with you?
Well, it's odd because as a former CBC employee, Poilievre's talk about shutting down the CBC concerns me, because I've worked in broadcasting all over the country. I worked for CBC in Toronto. I worked in Thunder Bay. I worked in Indigenous broadcasting in the Arctic. Radio is a really important feature of many people's lives. So whether he wants to shut down the CBC or not is a concern of mine, but that may seem purely selfish. But I've seen the impact of CBC across the country. So that's something that is very important to me. And dealing with the deficit, $60 billion. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to pay that down? And then dealing with Trump and dealing with the potential for the tariffs, how great they will be. Trump seems to be intransigent on this. And so that's a very worrisome thing. So we could be in a very bad situation to our largest, the largest importer of Canadian goods.
Well, Terry, thanks for your time this morning.
You bet, Corey.
Back to you, Marcy.
All right. Thank you, you two. Say hi to Terry, please.
Yes, I will. I wish he had headphones so we could have had a little chat, but that's where we're at right now.
Hi, Marcy.
Yeah, there we go.
Terry.
He says hi.
Terry and I worked together for a long time. Of course, now he's retired, and he found himself at the Tim Hortons this morning. And a lot of people have been talking and weighing in with Corey Funk, who's also there. We're talking about the one at Killarney, at Pembina, and Fort Richmond, weighing in on what they are hoping will happen next and what they're looking for in a prime minister. There are a lot of people talking about liking Pierre Poilievre purely on the basis of economics, that he's the person in the party that you're trusting with your bottom line, that Trudeau became out of touch with your families and with the cost of living across the country and here in the prairies. And it's interesting to read the comments. If you want to weigh in and join in, please go to our Facebook page this morning. You can also call us at 788-3205. Well, let's go to a big story in the news today. Parents can now look up the disciplinary records of their kids' teachers online. The province now has a public registry that discloses whether Manitoba teachers have been found guilty of misconduct or have been suspended from teaching in the province. This is part of a new law that was passed by the former PC government to help keep students safe. And 3 years ago, Winnipeg mother Krista Hurd spoke out after a teacher at her kid's former private school was accused of inappropriate behavior with female students. No criminal charges were laid at the time, but that teacher is no longer allowed to teach in Manitoba. That is something that Krista Hurd didn't know until the registry went live yesterday. And she joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. So obviously, without naming the teacher, you didn't know till yesterday that the teacher involved in this incident had their license suspended. What does it mean to you now that you have that information?
I mean, I think that was absolutely the right decision. I don't think anybody that has behaved that way with children and has been allowed to behave that way with children should be working with children. So I think that was absolutely the right call.
In 2022, you were a whistleblower in the case where that took place. We can name that it was King's School. The teacher was accused of inappropriately hugging students. Why was it important for you to get involved? What, if you think about your concerns at the time?
Well, both of my kids attended the King's School for quite a number of years. At the time that this was sort of leaked and more students had started to come forward, my children, we had already pulled them out of the King's School. There had been, mumblings and talking of this teacher for a number of years. The administration knew about it. The children had come forward to the administration and voiced their concerns about this teacher. And, it just became extremely important to me to give these students, past and present, a voice. Their voices had been ignored for a number of years, at least 4, if not 6, based on the number of students that I had spoken to. And the fact that the school didn't believe the students, it was important to me to let them know that somebody did. And the fact that this teacher is no longer allowed to teach also hopefully gives these students just another person, another organization, just who believes them and who is on their side and is validating what they've been through. So that's very important to me.
And it's interesting because you wouldn't have known that this was sort of that this happened, that any action happened disciplinary wise to this teacher, as we said before yesterday. How would a registry have helped back then?
I think it would have helped. To be honest, I don't know how much it would have helped at the time. Just considering MTS's wording with the registry and just how uncooperative the administration of the school was. Because insofar as the school goes, there were no findings. The police were called to investigate. No charges were pressed, and the police sort of left it as it was, insofar as the school and the church affiliated with the school goes. Nothing happened.
Can I just interject and ask, what do you mean by the wording of the registry? Because that's, I understand, one of your concerns, that even though this registry is there, that it's vague. I think you were telling one of your colleagues.
Yeah. So I was reading that unless there are findings, and this is the wording that they used, findings, that they would not be releasing sort of that information on the registry if a teacher had been investigated. It's only whether or not there were findings within that investigation that they would post anything, right? So my concern is, if there are no findings, because as I was just saying, in the case of the King's School, there were no findings. The teachers, the administration, they were all covering it up, right? So if there are no findings, they're not going to put anything on the registry. So how would anybody have even known that there was something going on had it not been for the media coverage, So I'm just a little bit concerned still with the wording of the the bill and how it's going to really protect the kids.
Because some of the wording, if people would see, I know that in Ian, in his report yesterday on television, he had sort of the registry up so you could see, and you would see words that would say, unsuitable. But it wouldn't elaborate on sort of the why, and that's what you're getting
Exactly.
into. Yeah. So that you would know some action had been taken or somebody wasn't allowed to teach, but you wouldn't have those details. Aside from the registry, what do you think needs to happen to make Manitoba classrooms safer?
That's a loaded question. Yeah, I don't know if I have the answers to that. I'm not a teacher. I'm not in the classroom. Probably better to ask teachers what they think with that.
What more than could
I am
be...
a parent, though, of school-age children. And I think that trust is probably the main issue. Trusting the teachers, but also trust in our government to make sure that what they are proposing is in fact in line with what they're saying, right? Like if you want to propose these bills and then cite children's safety, I want to know that my children's safety is your top priority, and children's safety isn't just being used as political cannon fodder on either side of the aisle to get votes, not to make this political, but everything's political, right? This is a PC bill that was put forward while the whole parents' rights things was happening. So is it about parents and protecting them and their rights, or is it about kids and protecting them and their rights?
Well, I don't want to, I'm not sure to get into the weeds of it. The core of your concern seems to come from wanting to make sure that you have information about really specific information about what's going on, so that
100%.
So
and
you
I mean,
as a parent can feel like you can trust.
Absolutely, and unless they have this bill regulated by specific people, terminology very clearly defined, I think that as of right now, it's a little bit too nebulous to really define a lot of what these terms are. This third-party committee that is going to be in place isn't yet. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for this committee, while we're waiting for these definitions, what are we doing? What's going to happen? So I really sincerely hope that MTS and our current government are in fact doing this for the safety of the children.
Krista, thank you very much for weighing in this morning. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
That's Krista Hurd. She's a Winnipeg parent. If you want to read more on the story on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba, please do so. Also, if you are a parent or if you are a teacher, would love to know what you think of this new registry. And it is obviously something that exists in other professions. It is new for teaching, for education. And so what about it is beneficial? What might give you pause or concern, or what more would you want from it? As Krista Hurd said, she finds some of the terminology vague. She'd like more detail. But you can weigh in on our listener line. It's the same line for all the stories, 788-3205.
The CBC News app delivers the answers you want to know and need to know.
What an extraordinary scene.
The breaking stories that shape your world. Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
Dropping the 8 now. We're just approaching Gaza.
Your source for mobile news. Delivered when you want, where you want.
This situation has changed very quickly.
The CBC News app. Download for free. We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Minus 17 in Winnipeg. We've been there all morning, and light snow continues to fall. In Winnipeg will fall to, speaking of which, a temperature of minus 21 this morning, and then it should rise a little bit through the afternoon. Big risk of frostbite out there today. Well, let's get some listener lines on. You've been calling about Trudeau.
Hi, my name is Ron Ulitsky. I'm not necessarily a fan of Justin Trudeau, but it's unfortunate that Canadian politics has come to a point where a federal leader is being criticized mostly for issues that are expressly supposed to be out of his jurisdiction, namely the monetary policy, inflation rate, and provincial and municipal regulations on housing. It screams to me that populism has taken a larger role in our politics, and especially with the interviews conducted today, it has me worried about the future of Canadian politics. Thank you.
Okay, so looking for more in our interviews on the topic. Thank you for weighing in. Appreciate it. We did have a partisan panel this morning, and then we were hearing from folks out at the Tim's with Corey and inviting you on Facebook. So weigh in anyway. That was listeners on the listener line, 788-3205. I always repeat it a lot. I want you to call us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC, and your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30, minus 17. And as Marcy mentioned, our temperature isn't going to rise right away. First, we fall to minus 21 before rising this afternoon. Attention has quickly turned in Ottawa to who will replace Justin Trudeau. Trudeau announced yesterday his intention to step aside as Prime Minister and Liberal leader once the party chooses his replacement. And the party has to act fast.
We need to balance both very quick timing and democratic processes.
Not only does the party need a new leader, the party does need to move back to the middle.
We are literally up against the wall here. It's not so much the interests of the Liberal Party that need to play out here, it's the interests of Canada.
Some MPs weighing in. Some Liberal MPs did thank Trudeau for his leadership and for eventually listening to their calls for him to step aside. But now the pressure to find a replacement. And as the federal Liberal Party heads towards that leadership race, Manitoba Pork says a top priority for the government should be the threat by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. General Manager Cam Dahl says a strategic plan is needed for all agriculture and food industries, not just for pork.
We still have a government, we still have a cabinet, we still have ministers. And, you know, this needs to be at the very top of their list of the work that they're carrying out today. So I would hope that our federal Minister of Agriculture is going to, take on this task and take on the job of ensuring that we have a plan in place.
Dahl says the pork industry exports about 40% of what it produces to the United States. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says political leaders in U.S. border states do not support new tariffs being threatened by Donald Trump. Kinew is in North Dakota today, meeting with that state's newly elected governor. Kinew says he also spoke with the governor of Wisconsin and the U.S. ambassador to Canada.
We as a trading province, we as an agricultural province, we as a manufacturing province have really great relationships with North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that it's important for us to nourish these relationships to build a strong partnership across the Canadian and U.S. border.
Kinew also says Prime Minister Trudeau's resignation yesterday is not interfering in trade talks with the U.S. Meanwhile, Canada's premiers have written a joint letter to the Prime Minister requesting regular group meetings over the final 2.5 months he is in office. The letter says with important business to attend to, specifically the incoming Trump administration, Canada needs to demonstrate strength and unity. And the premiers are calling for the first of the New Year meetings to be held next week. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden has issued a statement on the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Biden says, as Prime Minister, Trudeau strengthened the U.S.-Canada alliance. And Biden adds, the world is better off because of Trudeau's time in office. In other news, a new Manitoba teacher registry allows anyone to see if a teacher has been suspended or if they can no longer teach in this province. The government made it public yesterday. The registry does not state reasons why a teacher has been disciplined. Krista Hurd once had to take her kids out of a school over concerns about inappropriate behavior by a teacher. Hurd doesn't think the database goes far enough to keep students safe.
If somebody is suspended for honoring a student's pronouns versus trying to give them back massages, I see a difference in that, right? And I would like to see on the registry itself what the cause is for that suspension or that termination.
The registry makes the province one of a handful in Canada to disclose such information to the public. A Point Douglas building that housed a Greek Orthodox church for decades went up in flames last night for the fourth time since October 2021, and it happened the night before Orthodox Christmas. Firefighters spent all night battling flames and smoke at the building on Euclid that used to be home to Holy Ascension Greek Orthodox Church. Stephanie Sarlakis is the church's secretary. She says they moved out of the building after the third fire in June and have been holding services in people's homes.
It is bittersweet because, we were located in that building for more than 40 years, and it's just kind of like closing a chapter and kind of figuring out what our next steps are.
Sarlakis says a sale was pending for the building, but she knows last night's fire will affect those plans. You can find more Manitoba news. All you have to do is head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you very much for the morning, Heather.
Thank you.
So big thanks to Heather Wells and to Megan Ketcherson and Joni Nicolo in our news center, to May McKillop, Corey Funk, as well as Kevin Ipatebo and Abby Adiyemi, our live team. And speaking of Abby, he's got one last look at our forecast.
Yeah, Churchill, very cold this morning. We're looking at that minus 50 wind chill will be subsiding as you get closer into the mid-morning period. But for Winnipeg, we're still at minus 17, cloudy skies, light snow we're feeling. Then we'll see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds, which will be similar conditions for the southern part of the province. Though the wind chill will be felt, it's going to be feeling like minus 36 across the southern part of the province today. So you want to bundle up.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks also to contributors to today's show, associate producers Chidi Akuma and Jim Agapito, as well as leaders in unit Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. Well, take care. Be well, Manitoba. We will be back with you again tomorrow on CBC with another edition of Information Radio. And The Current is coming up next on 89.3 FM.